warm and friendly hello. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined in segment number 2 by one of our good friends, Rob Donaldson, who does such great work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets. We're going to talk with him about the dynamics of conference play, why you do want to be looking at perhaps fading some of these teams with really, really good records right now. And additionally, we're going to be diving in on a few games that we've got for Wednesday and looking at the divide between the top few teams in college basketball and the rest, and why there might be a little bit of value in fading some of those top teams. And then in the final segment, I'm going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Wednesday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, Larry CM, they mean does not matter, so per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, we had ourselves a fun day of college basketball on Tuesday. Let's dive into it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Duke overcomes a road test against Louisville. They got down 47-38 at the half, and then in the second half they dominated 46-26. They outscored Louisville in the second half 84-73. The final is for Louisville, 12 of 38 from three-point range. They were missing Mikel Brown in this one, and that reflected in the fact that they lost a turnover battle 14-12. Brown, not necessarily the world's greatest three-point shooter, but main facilitator for this team. For Duke, they win the rebound battle 39-37, and man, that was really able to do it all. That would be the guy that's been doing it all season long, Cameron Boozer, with 27 points, 8 boards, 4 assists. But how about Isaiah Evans, 4 of 10 from 3, 23 points. And Caleb Foster didn't light it up from the outside, but 20 big points out of him. So Duke, they were looking a little bit shaky to begin ACC conference play, but that's a big win for them. This is a nice win for Tennessee. How about 85-71 all over Texas? As for Texas, they do go 11 of 29 from 3, but Tennessee, they did a nice job winning the rebound battle 37-31, and Jacoby Gillespie has had his ups and downs to begin the season. How about 34 points, 5 assists, only 2 turnovers, so kept it nice and clean. Nate Ament, 8 points on 5 turnovers, and still Tennessee was able to win and cover this game, with Texas being able to get 20 points out of Trayvon Mark. He started to heat up, but the rest of the team didn't necessarily do their part defensively, and for Tennessee, they did a nice job in terms of being able to dominate that game down low. Michigan finally got a test. In each of their last 10 games, they had won by 18 plus points, 74-72. They just barely get by Penn State, as Michigan 8 of 27 from 3, and Penn State won the rebound battle 43-37. That was a bit shocking, as Yaxel Lendeborg, he was dealing with a little bit of an injury, still played 10.7 rebounds, but how about for Penn State off the bench? Josh Reed, 13 points, 10 rebounds. For Penn State, they win the turnover battle 15-10. They just didn't knock down their shots, 8 of 30 from three-point range, but spirited effort from Penn State. So finally a cover against the Wolverines. Minnesota as a home underdog. They take it to Iowa, 70-67. The final is Iowa just 7 of 26 from three-point range. Bennett Sturts was doing his part. He had 21 points. He also did go 2 of 10 from three-point range. And for Minnesota, just 5 of 20 from three-point range. And Minnesota loses the rebound battle in this game by a count of 39-28. They did not grab any second chances, but how about Langston Reynolds? 22 big points in this one. Minnesota gets 21 of 28 at the free throw line. They win the turnover battle 14-10. So Minnesota, the state with the smallest strengths in the union, a lot to celebrate there. Oklahoma State, they were able to get the job done against a ranked Central Florida team. Now, obviously, this was one of those games where the unranked team was a favorite. 87-76 to finalize for Oklahoma State. 10 of 19 from three-point range, while Central Florida was 7 of 33 from the outside. That's exactly why they lost this game, as for Central Florida, they actually did a nice job in the turnover battle, 16-11. They had 13 offensive rebounds to Oklahoma State's 5, but just could not drain any shots. And for Oklahoma State, Parsa Fala, he was able to give the team 24 big points. So quality winner there, and a quality winner from Florida. It's been a little bit rough to begin the season. One of your lesser against the spread teams, but 92-77, they're able to take it to Georgia in this one, as Georgia just 4 of 19 from three-point range, and they got decimated on the glass, 56-35. And to the credit of Georgia, they won the turnover battle by a count of 13-9. Backcourt has still been very suspect for Florida, as Xavier Lee, Boogie Flan, they both did not have great performances. Flan 8 points, 6 points out of Xavier Lee, but these guys were able to keep things a little bit cleaner. They just let the big men go to work down low, like Thomas Haw, double-double, 12 rebounds, 21 points. Micah Hand-Logden off the bench, 11 rebounds. So Florida, they do find a way to be able to get the job done out there. And then If you're looking more at some unranked teams, we did see some interesting games out there as Miami of Ohio continues to be undefeated. They did not get the cover against Western Michigan. If you like me, laid the points. They were up by 15 points with like 90 seconds remaining, but still, Miami of Ohio, 87-76 winners for Miami of Ohio. Just 6 of 26 from three-point range, but 27 out of 34. They win the rebound battle, 41-34. Lost the turnover battle, 14-11, but off the bench, Almar Allison, who comes over from Bradley, 21 big points out of him. So Miami of Ohio doing a nice quality job out there, and also this team was able to do a very quality job as the Wisconsin Badgers, they're able to lay it on UCLA, this by a count of 80-72. Wisconsin was up 45-31 at the half, cooled down a little bit in the second half, but for UCLA, 1 of 17 from three-point range. Not great to say the least. UCLA actually wins the rebound battle by a count of 35-32, but Wisconsin, they weren't necessarily lighting it up 10 of 30 from three-point range, but a whole heck lot better than 1 of 17 from three, as Nick Boyd in this game had 20 points. John Blackwell, he's able to supply 17 points as well, and for UCLA, they were able to get 16 points out of Tyler Bilodeau, but man, they could not bury a three to save their lives, so Wisconsin, a nice clean winner out there. For LSU, they were playing without De'Don Thomas, and it showed. South Carolina, 78-68 winners. If you like me had the over, this game got very underwhelming late, but for South Carolina, they go 12 of 21 from three-point range. Elijah Strong lived up to his name, 10 of 15 from the floor, 30 points, 4 of 4 on his three-point shooting. LSU actually wins the rebound battle 42-30, but for LSU, they also lose the turnover battle by a count of 14-6, and South Carolina has been good at taking care of the ball, so a nice winner out there for South Carolina. Air Force with perhaps the most deplorable performance of the night, 99-62. Utah State just absolutely lambasted them in this game. For Utah State, 12 of 26 from three. Air Force was 6 of 20 from three. Air Force loses a turnover battle, 13-7. They lose a rebound battle, 40-25. And MJ Collins continues to be great for the Utah State team. 20 points out of him. And Kobe King off the bench, he supplied 15 points as well. Had a hair-brainy game between Texas A&M and Auburn. Auburn loses at home, 90-88. And even though Mackenzie Mbakbo is out of the fold for Texas A&M, good versatility here. They go 13 of 30 from three. For Auburn, just 7 of 26 from three, and it's been a very disappointing season for Taj Pettiford, who came in off the bench, 11 points on 1 of 6 3-point shooting. You expected a little bit more out of him because Sean Hall has been the main guy for the team, and once again, he's performed 32 points, 12 rebounds, but for the Texas A&M team, they did a solid job in terms of just being able to hit those threes, as they did lose the rebound battle 40-34, but they had on their side Pop Isaacs off the bench, 21 points. He's been a little bit silent this year, but he was able to have himself a very nice performance out there. Also having themselves a very nice performance. Syracuse on the road, they take it to Georgia Tech, 82-72 the final, and Syracuse has been a better defensive team this year, but they go 7 of 19 from three. Donnie Freeman, just off of injury, he supplies 27 points, 9 rebounds. That should be able to elevate this team moving forward, and for the Ramble and Eric of Georgia Tech, they lose a rebound battle 44-34. They go just 4 of 18 from three-point range, so not what they were looking for out there. This is exactly what these guys were looking for, though. You were able to get St. John's to be able to deliver a nice win and cover on the road, 84-70. The final is for St. John's, 7 of 19 from three-point. Zuby Ejiofor, 18 points. He had a rock-solid performance, and for Butler, they had a tough time taking care of the ball. They lost the turnover battle 21-5. Hard to win games when you lose the turnover battle 21-5, and they shot 7 of 17 from three-point range, 24 out of 48 from the floor, but they didn't have too many possessions to work with, so that was a little bit rough for them. And then this game was a very fun one for West Virginia. They were overnight a 2.5-point favorite. They closed more around about a 1.5-point favorite, so depending upon your line if you got the cover or not, but 62-60, West Virginia does get the job done. 11 of 23 from three-point range for West Virginia. Chance Moore off the bench gave you more with 14 points, but it was all about Hunter Huff, huffing and puffing his way to 24 points. And for Cincinnati, they lose a rebound battle 37-30, and they went 12 of 35 from three. Not too bad out of them, but from 2-point range, they actually go 10 out of 27, so that was a little bit less than savory, and the Cincinnati offense just continues to be not great, to say the least. And right now, I have to have this up at midnight Pacific, 3 o'clock a.m. Eastern. Wyoming is just absolutely lambasting UNLV, so that's not necessarily great for old UNLV. We shall see what happens there. But for NC State, we saw them go on the road, get the job done, get a win against Boston College, 79-71. The final is Boston College finally found some three-point shooting. They go 9 of 18 from three. They've been terrible with their offense, but their defense, which has actually been solid, lets them down. They allow NC State to go 13 out of 22 from three-point range. Darian Williams, who had a few silent games, he was able to supply 22 points. Nice performance out there. And then you saw Kansas in overtime just barely get by TCU. This was a nip and tuck game in which it looked like TCU was going to be able to run and hide with it at the end of it. But Kansas, they do find a way to persevere. They do not get the cover. But Darren Peterson, great name. He was able to be great in this game. He supplies 32 plus points for this Kansas team. They actually do lose a rebound battle. And for TCU, 13 out of 33 from 3-point range. But still, for Kansas, they did a solid job in terms of being able to win that turnover battle. For Peterson, he went 13 out of 15 at the free throw line. So for Kansas, they do find a way to be able to get it done there. And for Houston, they were in a little bit of a tight game against Texas Tech. Texas Tech gets a cover, but Houston, they find a way to pull it out 69-65. The final is Houston just 4 of 17 from 3-point range, but they win the rebound battle 36-35, and they dominated the turnover battle 14-6 as JT Toppin continues to do his part, 18 points, 11 rebounds. But for Texas Tech, 9 of 28 from 3-point range. Christian Anderson, who's been one of their main guys, no show in this game, 7 points. And for Houston, it hasn't necessarily been a thing of beauty. They have not been able to cover a lot of spreads, but they find a way to get the job done out there. And this is with still a game or two pending out there on the West Coast. We had that Nevada game play late, but that said, if you're looking trend-wise at what we're getting in college basketball right now, it's been pretty even up with regards to overs and unders, as the under has a very slim lead, 1,232 unders to 1,228 overs. Right now, favorites against the spread now hitting at 49.7%, as underdogs have really been barking over the last 7 days. Overall for the season, favorites 1,223 and 1,236 against the spread. Meanwhile, if you're taking a look at what we're all getting trend-wise in college basketball over the last 7 days have been very unkind to favorites, 136 and 161 against the spread. That's less than 46%. And the over rate right around about 50.5%, 150 overs, 147 unders, and a few pushes along the way. So that's where we're seeing in college basketball right now, and that's what we're all getting trend-wise. Coming next, how about if we do chat with our good friend Rob Donaldson, who does such great work with the show/podcast Rob's Best Bets, right here on Cuffs Good Seats with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Cups Seats with myself, Craig Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man, as we've got Rob Donaldson aboard. He does such great work with the show/podcast Rob's Best Bets, looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. I know that he's also dialed in with what we're seeing on the football front, as now we're getting into the playoffs, both in the college and the football sector of things. He does such an amazing job over at Underdog Fantasy, along with the Rob's Best Bets show, and you're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at RobDFB altogether. And Rob, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Yep, it is always a pleasure, Greg. And now that we're kind of past the almost like the dull parts of the schedule, where for an entire week we don't really have any games, and then there's also the kind of the layoff of a lot of student sections not being back in the fold. Now we get really into the best environment time of year when talking about college hoops. The whole world is kind of watching this, with football almost kind of maneuvering itself out of the picture. And because of that, I think we get some really, really fun games down the stretch from here all the way until April.
Oh, no question about it. And how do you take a look at this time of year? Because now we've got like 13, 14 data points for a lot of these teams. A lot of these teams have played a few conference games, but not necessarily a ton of conference games. And we've got a lot of imbalance in schedules, which can make some of those numbers be a little bit wonky for some of these teams.
100%. I think what gets overlooked this time of year, and I've been kind of talking about it the last few times I've been on here, but when you look at win-loss records, a lot of people are going to gravitate towards the teams that have that glossy win-loss record. I think of like a Nebraska right now, and they are playing great ball. Heck, you can look at a Michigan, you can look at a UConn, you can look at an Arizona, and that win-loss record may tell you all you need to know about how good a team actually is. You're going to have a lot of teams that are kind of in that mix of 11-3, 9-5, maybe even like a 7-11 type of record, because teams over-challenge themselves in terms of the non-con schedule, and that leads to some really good betting value. And so this time of year in particular, I'm honing in on the teams that I don't think the win-loss record truly is representing how good they actually are, or maybe vice versa. I'm looking at the glossy win-loss records and saying, hey, I think that team could actually get really hit down when you're talking about playing in that conference level of opponent. So I think this time of year, that's 100% where you want to align yourself in terms of picking the best value on the betting front.
And how do you take a look at things with regards to that? Because a lot of these teams with a better record, they're going to have the better metrics. How do you sort of try to separate that out? Do you take a look at sort of like strength of schedule, home road splits? What really leads you to betting on some of the teams that you do/do not?
Yeah, I think every single offseason, something that I really enjoy about your show and something that I get to do when I come on here is talk about the teams that maybe on the front half of the season, the heavy transfer portal teams, we get to talk about, hey, maybe this isn't a team that we're backing in, November, December, early January. But as the season goes on, the gel starts to happen. I think we're going to start to see that with a lot of different in terms of the transfer portal heavy squads. I also think that when you look at the coaching angles of all these teams, like for example, Kansas right now is 10-4. I think Bill Self will eventually get that team to a better spot. The same way that I believe that when you look at, say, the American Conference or a Missouri Valley Conference type of team, some of these coaches like Eric Henderson over at Drake or an Andy Kennedy at UAB, which is every single year, by the way. Andy Kennedy starts off slow. They have a great conference schedule or conference performance. Every single league has those types of guys where, yeah, they're 9-5 right now. They're 10-4 or 10-5 right now. But down the stretch, this is just a perennial power within the league, and that's going to show up once the kind of coaching ends up taking a hold.
Yep, and I do think that is so important to be taking a look at sort of that track record with these coaches, and some of them are in newer places, like you mentioned Eric Henderson over at Drake now after he spent so much time at South Dakota State. So well said there. As Rob Donaldson, who does such great work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets, he's joining me on Coast to Coast Soups. And how do you take a look at the dynamic of home court advantage now in conference play as well? Because there are some of these environments that are just absolutely ruckus, they're absolutely insane, and there are some of the biggest advantages, not just in college basketball, but in all of sports. Meanwhile, you've got some of these environments, I hate to pick on it, but like the Metro Atlantic, for example, where you could take the subway to be able to get to a game in a road game from time to time, and, well, that doesn't seem like necessarily the most difficult of travel in the world, and their fans are able to get to those road games.
Right, and honestly, right now, what's so interesting about the net and making your metrics look better is a lot of these teams, so like the first kind of window in history, the last 3 years, we are starting to see some high-level competition teams not go on the road early in their non-conference schedule. They'll schedule like a quote-unquote neutral site game, which is just going to be like Arizona playing in Phoenix or Duke playing in MSG, where they're still going to have the home crowd. Something that's really interesting leading up until conference play is when you look at 14 games, you're assuming that they've had true road contests. Well, look at Duke coming off of that Florida State game, which was kind of their first true road game outside of Michigan State, which was played in not East Lansing. I can't remember exactly which Michigan city it was played in, but that's kind of the element that's at play here. A lot of these teams that already are 14 games in their schedule are now first time going against Louisville on the road. TCU, for example, as we're recording this here on Tuesday, they're traveling to their first true road game this season, despite already playing 14 games. And a large part is just because a lot of these neutral site affairs that we see have been taking over the non-con slate. Also, the midseason tournaments that we get are also a big part of that as well. And all of a sudden, we're starting to see teams truly have to battle themselves. I don't think that the ruckus environments necessarily are going to be the ones that just rule the day only. I think a lot of these teams just testing themselves on the road, period, for the first time is going to really shine light on how good these programs actually are.
Yep, and it is always interesting to be taking a look at that first true road game with a team like Duke that you brought up. Even against Georgia Tech, they were having a little bit of issue there. So I do think that that's so well said by you. And certainly it's going to be interesting to see what we get out of some of these teams that have disappointed to begin the season. And there's a lot of them out there in the Big East. How do you take a look at a pair of them that are going to be in action on Wednesday? Marquette is currently a 4.5-point favorite against Xavier. Creighton more of a 6.5-point underdog when they go up against Villanova. And I think that those are two teams of very much intrigue because I feel like with Creighton, they've actually started to figure it out a little bit more, recognize that they didn't get that win against Seton Hall. That was a bit of a collapse, but at the very least, they look better. And then there are just some teams that I don't think that they're going to be able to rebound and recover. I look at a team like a Marquette, and that's a team that I want to be avoiding a lot here moving forward.
Yeah, Marquette almost kind of feels akin to Clemson football, right? Where they don't dabble in the portal. They rely on just what their in-house development yields. And it's usually a great strategy outside of this transfer portal NIL era. And it almost kind of feels like what Shaka Smart did this offseason was really almost rely on his own hubris and his own confidence to rule the day and say, hey, we don't need this new system. We're going to do it our way and still produce results. Well, it kind of feels like it's totally backfiring.
It's producing a turd.
It's producing a flat out turd. And I think it's now you got to get with the program. And so when you look at last year's Final Four, Elite Eight, transfer portal heavy teams, and I don't think that was just kind of a one-off. I think we're going to start to see the teams that rise to the crop, and every single league within its own vacuum are going to be the ones that dabbled with a little bit of both. They dabbled with that continuity, but they also stuck to the new element at play here, which is building through the portal, building from, higher level teams and lower level teams and finding that middle ground. I think those are the teams that you have to gravitate towards in 2026 college basketball. And to your point, there are some programs right now that I wouldn't believe in. I would say Marquette is definitely one of them, but there are programs like we just talked about with Creighton, and you brought it up to that point. I love backing a guy like a McDermott where they started off very, very slow, but obviously have talent and are starting to figure out rotations. Owen Freeman's kind of getting out of the fold a little bit more than he was at the beginning part of the year. And now the offense and the defense kind of feels like it's humming. That's one of the type of teams that I want to buy in on from a value standpoint because they're going to be catching lines that I don't think that they deserve to be catching.
Yep, and I think that that's so well said by you, and I think that that is such an interesting dynamic, and man, right now for Marquette, just not great to say the least. Not a lot of depth, not a lot of defense, so that's a little bit of an issue, and then I take a look at this sort of game, and I think that's intriguing, because little was expected out of Fordham, but this Fordham team, they're not flashy on offense, to say the least, but they're rock solid on defense. They're doing a great job of rebounding. Right now, that's a total of 134.5 between they and George Mason. George Mason is a 6.5-point favorite. How do you take a look at a game like this where we know it's going to be very low possession? We know that Fordham is the inferior offensive team, but we know that they're a very strong defensive team.
Yeah, I think this kind of goes to one of the points I brought up earlier where look at the glossy record teams, find the ones that maybe feel like, yeah, that's a good team, but perhaps is just a little bit counterfeit. I kind of tend to feel like when you watch the flow of these George Mason games, no matter who they've been going up against in a lot of these mid-major versus mid-major kind of contests, it's been wire-to-wire competitive outside of the last 5 minutes where they're dressing up the final score. And all of a sudden you look at the box score, you say, hey, George Mason won by 17. That's great. You neglect the fact that it was a 4-point game throughout the entire thing wire-to-wire. A 14-1 George Mason in the A10, a potential team that could catch an at-large bid if they keep this kind of trend going. Yeah, that's a very good team, and I still think they're going to be a great team, even if they drop some here and there. But when you're laying 6.5 in conference play on the road for your first road game in conference, and you're taking on a Fordham team that, to your point, has been able to slow down other opponents like crazy and still hit enough of their offensive shots to be competitive game in, game out, I think this is a perfect buy spot on a Fordham team where you want to talk about coaches that are starting to find their groove. I think Mike Magpayo, through the first 2 months, was going through the motions of trying to figure out which rotations to use. They were getting a little bit healthier as well, and now they're playing their best basketball. I love betting on a Fordham team in this spot here.
Yep, and with that Fordham team, I do think that they're going to be able to do a great job of keeping this under. And you know that George Mason is going to be able to play some rock solid defense as well. So certainly something I'm looking at as Rob Donaldson, who does such great work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets. He's going to be on Coast to Coast Hoops. And I know you've been talking about sort of the type of teams that you're looking to /fade. Are there a few teams in particular right now that you're starting to find some value on, whether they be playing on Wednesday, whether they're going to be playing on Thursday this weekend? Are there just a few teams in general that you feel like there might be a little bit of reversal for them and you're starting to find a little bit of a buy spot on them?
Yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting to see how a number of these teams and kind of these open mid-major leagues kind of go, because I look at the Missouri Valley Conference, for example, and this is one of my favorite leagues just because I'm out here in the Midwest. I love going to Arch Madness over the years, and so I've always gravitated towards the MVC in a lot of different directions. And now with no Darian DeVries, now with no Ben McCollum, and Drake sort of occupying that top spot as just like an inherent, of course they are, sort of deal. Now we have a more open league in a very competitive historical league, but we have an elder statesman with Ben Jacobson at UNI. And I think when you're looking at Northern Iowa down the stretch, whether they're laying a big number, whether they're laying a modest number, whether it's just a pick 'em like it is on Wednesday against a really good team in Belmont, I think this is one of the better Northern Iowa teams that we've seen in a lot of different years. I think back to the Wes Washburn UNI teams when they knocked off UNC in Cedar Falls. I think this is akin to that. I mean, they went to St. Mary's earlier this year. That was a wire-to-wire great contest. And I feel like when you're keying in on the Missouri Valley Conference, or heck, even like the Big Sky, and I look at a team like a Montana State, those are some programs that I really look to back right now because of the historical track record, but also just what they showed in non-con play. And I do think that with those two teams in particular, it's really going to come to a nice head here in conference play throughout now until the end of the season.
Yep, I do think that is going to be a lot of fun to be taking a look at. And we do have some of the top teams in college basketball that are going to be in action as well. As a matter of fact, the two big ones in the Big 12. Right now with Iowa State, they're about a 5.5 point road favorite against Baylor with a total of 157.5. And I want to get your thoughts here because you are out there in the great state of Iowa. And I know that there's a lot of people that are starting to value Baylor a little bit more now that James Nanji's out there. But is it just me, or are we making way too much out of these G League guys coming in? Because even Nanji laid a pretty big turd in that game against TCU. It feels like these G League guys, and everyone's outraged about the G League guys coming in, they're not making much of an impact for these teams. And I feel like Iowa State is actually starting to get a little bit of, shall we say, good value here, because a lot of people think that Najee's going to come in there and save the day for Baylor, and game number one clearly was not the case.
You know, when does that buy point flip? Because obviously these guys were good enough to not only play internationally, but also get drafted into the NBA. And I think, like any sport, and we talk about this with boxing and say, oh, the ring rust, a fighter being out for over a year, he's going to come in maybe a little bit slow. College basketball's the same way. We just got done talking about how the first 2 months of a season don't define a team. A lot of teams use that as kind of a growing point or a leaping point for the rest of the season. Well, you got a guy like a Nanji who, you know, didn't play a lot of minutes, didn't play really quality minutes last time out in his debut against TCU. When does he start to kick it into gear? And almost assumingly is not going to be right here in the heat of battle against a very good Iowa State team. Maybe he proves everybody wrong and we start to see that explosion, but I think you got to credit Baylor for just being Baylor prior to that addition. And is that good enough to cover a 6.5, a 7 type of line out there against Iowa State? I tend to think it's not. I think Iowa State also, at the same side of the token, is one of those teams right now where if you're wanting to back them, you are paying the uppity, most premium price that you possibly can. It's like betting on Nebraska right now, where is there really a buy point with them? Absolutely not. Is there a sell point? I don't necessarily think that's the case either, but maybe kind of lean that direction. I think when you have these types of lines, like an Iowa State laying a 6.5 or a 7 on the road, it's a perfectly placed line for a reason. And that's why, as a great game, it is as great of a game as it is. I probably am just laying off when it comes down to it here.
Yep, and when it comes comes to this game, this is a very, very harebrained number, as right now I'm seeing Arizona in a lot of places as about a 20 or so point favorite against Kansas State. Is this a case where with these teams like Iowa State, Arizona, Michigan, that they're just starting to get a little bit overvalued because we know that these teams are amazing. These are the top 3 teams in all of college basketball, in my opinion, and I don't think that there's a lot of question with it, but we talk about this a lot. There's a buy point on a sell point on every single one of these teams, and typically with the most dominant teams in non-conference playing college basketball, they seem to come back to earth a little bit more in January. That said, we also have a Kansas State team that's disappointed time and time again, and it just feels like things are not really going well in the Jerome Tang era as well. That needs to be thrown in here.
I think you couldn't have done better analysis there, because absolutely is this Arizona line inflated to all get out. 100%. I wouldn't be personally wanting to be back in Arizona, even though I think there's a lot of scenarios that point to this being a 40-point winner. Like, I think when you have a team on the other side, like a Kansas State, that has been so volatile, you don't have that consistent range. You don't have a tight range. You have a range that could include a Kansas State outright winner or them losing by 50. Do I want to back that sort of team? Or, which angle triumphs, right? Do you want to sell high on a team like in Arizona that's blowing out everybody, or a team like Michigan that's blowing out everybody? Or do you want to take that hyper volatile team that can get blown out by literally anybody? I don't think either angle really triumphs in that scenario or that playing out. And so I wouldn't be keen to back either side there, but I definitely want to be keen to back the teams that are at the highest value points, because that eventually, to your point, they are going to go through a 4-game stretch where they might win every single game and not cover a single one. I think Michigan is going to be coming to that head sooner rather than any other team because of the margin of victory. But Arizona, they're kind of right there in the same boat, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And Rob, is there anything else that you're going to be taking a look at on the Wednesday card? Because this is a something for everyone card. You've got some Big 12 action. You've got yourself some Big East. We've got some of the little guys out there as well. Anything that's really standing out to you?
I think when you look at one of the later games in the night and you're talking about true road games, the way that we have been in this episode, I look at SMU coming off of that massive win against North Carolina, where it was competitive in the first half, but they really opened it up in the second. How do they respond in this kind of this first momentous game where now they have a number next to their name? They're taking on a Clemson team that's come up just so close against a lot of really quality opponents already this season. Is this the one that Clemson actually ends up, winning from start to finish? I tend to think that's going to be the case. And I wanted to see a little bit of a better line than 4.5. I wanted to see hopefully like a 2.5, 3, but maybe that's just being a little bit greedy. And I do think 4.5 is a number that I'm willing to jump at. So in terms of kind of the more high profile games, I am all over the Clemson Tigers in that game.
Yep, that is going to be a lot of fun to look at. And with SMU, I do think that that's a little bit correlated as well. If you like the under, you probably like Clemson. If you like the over, you might like SMU a little bit more as well, because SMU, breakneck pace team, Clemson, slow and controlled as well. And a man that's always in control of giving us great information, a man that does such great work looking at college basketball as you, Rob. Love the good people at home. Know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Well, hey, Greg, it is always a blast talking college hoops with you. And now that we have conference play back in the fold, we're going to have a lot of fantastic games every single time we get together to talk about. And for those who want to follow my bets on a nightly basis, Twitter/X at RobDFB, and also on my YouTube channel, which is just my name, Rob Donaldson. But as always, Greg, I appreciate having me on, man.
It is always great to be able to have Rob aboard. Just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to looking at college basketball every single time he joins me. Learned such great insights and did so once again today. So big thanks to Rob for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Wednesday as we hit some bank shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It is always a pleasure to be joined by Rob Donaldson, who does such great work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights, and he did so once again today. So big thanks to Rob for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Wednesday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at gunit_81, and we are going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the bigger conferences first, and then these are the conferences that are going to be at the bottom. We've got the Patriot League, the Big South. If I'm not mistaken, we've got a game or two perhaps out there in the America East. We may not, but if we do have any America East games, those are going to be at the bottom as well with 6 digits on the rotation in time order. So how about if we get things started? This is 663, 664 on the betting board. It is Furman, and Furman is on the road facing off against Chattanooga. Chattanooga, a 1.5 point home underdog. Total on this game 144.5 to 145.5. I made Chattanooga the 1.5 point favorite, so I do like them on the money line. It's a Furman team that has been able to do a solid job down low, but their 3-point shooting has really fallen off a cliff, and this is a Furman team that is allowing quite a few second chances. On the road, they're allowing teams to grab over 29% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. Meanwhile, Chattanooga, they have been about 290th in the country in terms of their defensive rebound percentage, so they are allowing a lot of second and third chances themselves, but have been far better at home. And the one thing that this Chattanooga team has done a really good job of, they are not turning the ball over. They are only turning the ball over about 9.7 times per contest. Top 35 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and they love to waste away from 3-point range, and they're not the same 3-point shooting team that they have been in past years. Jordan Frinson is a lone double-figure scorer, 14 points. He shoots 38% from 3-point range, and then you do have Tate Darner, Brendan Watkins, a pair of guys that do shoot over 40% from 3-point range. Between the two of them, you've been able to get about 17.5 points per contest, but you don't really have a ton down low with this team. Only one player on the roster gives you over 4 rebounds per game. That'd be Sebastian Hartman, and he's been dealing with injury all throughout the season. And then for Furman, while their interior play has been very good, they've been a top 25 team with that 2-point shooting percentage. They are really relying upon freshmen to really step up in the backcourt, with Alex Wilkins, a freshman right now, being their top scorer, 17.5 points, 5 assists per game, but 3.9 turnovers per game. Furman now falls outside the top 235 in terms of ball security, and they're not generating any turnovers. Outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Now, one good thing that this team does, they don't put you on the free throw line. This has been a top 25 team in terms of fewest free throws allowed on a per possession basis, so they're preventing easy looks there. And you've got a pair of teams that are playing a little bit more slowly than they typically do, especially this Chattanooga team. Chattanooga is typically a little bit more of a mid-tempo team. They've never really been a warp speed team, but now they're hovering in that neighborhood about 300th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And compared to the beginning part of the season, Furman has sped themselves up a little bit, but still just 227th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. I do think that Chattanooga is going to be able to do a relatively okay job with their interior play, as this is a Chattanooga team that, in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, are hovering right around about 175th in all of college basketball. And Chattanooga has become a top 225 defense in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, better than what they have been in past years, and they're not going to give themselves a lot of second chances. So I do like the under. I saw my total 143.5 with Chattanooga outside the top 300 in terms of percentage of their missed shots. They result in an offensive rebound, but even though this Furman team does have a bit of an edge down low, Charles Johnson give you 10 points, 9 rebounds per game. Cooper Bowser, 6.5 boards per contest, and Bowser, by the way, has dealt with quite a bit of injury. He's been out the last few games, probably going to be out once again. I do think that Chattanooga gets the job done, so like the Mocs on the money line, and I do like this total under 665, 666. It is Wofford, and they're going to be playing UNC Greensboro. Greensboro, a 5.5 point underdog, 152.5 to 153.5 is the total. It's not a total year of a 145.5. I do like the under. Greensboro has been playing a lot faster than they have in past years, and I think that they're going to get back to their roots a little bit more, as Greensboro currently about 193rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but playing at a clip of about 4.5 possessions fewer per game in their last 3 games than they did to begin this season. Wofford, not a fast team, not a slow team, about 220th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and it's a Wofford team that they just aren't going to give themselves a lot of second and third chances, and it's a Wofford team that's been pretty pedestrian with regards to their shooting. This despite the fact that they've got a former guard now as their head coach, and Mr. Kevin Clintner, and for Wofford, they shoot 25.9% from 3-point range at home. I did set my line, though, at a 5.5. If we get to a 5 or less, I'd be willing to lay at 6 or more. That does become my buy point on UNC Greensboro. Greensboro's been about a country average team in terms of their 3-point shooting, and I am seeing a 6.5 coming coming onto the board that would be a buy point for me on a Greensboro team that overall from 3-point range, they've been shooting in that neighborhood about 34.6% from the outside. That goes down to 31% away from home. And with this Greensboro team, what I think is going to be very important is to be able to get Justin Neely going. He's been rock solid down low, 15.5 points, 11.5 boards, 3 assists, does a little bit of everything. And then Donald Whitehead Jr. in the backcourt, 12.5 points. He shoots about 34% from 3-point range. This Greensboro team does a good job taking care of the ball. Top 125 team towards fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. This has been an uncharacteristically bad defense, though, as they are generating no turnovers whatsoever. Outside the top 325 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, Greensboro currently 326th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Wofford is 257th, but again, neither of these teams are necessarily excelling on offense. On the Wofford side of things, Niles Malchowski, who comes over from Central Florida, he's been rock solid, 15.5 points, 3 assists. He only shoots about 33% from 3-point range, and you've had Kamar Holmes be able to supply 16.5 points, 2.5 steals per contest as Wofford. A little bit better at generating turnovers than they have been in the past, but still well outside the top 225 with that regard. They've been outside the top 200 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They're outside the top 270 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, while they themselves are struggling a little bit from the outside. Wofford has become a top 225 team with regards to rebound percentage, but I do think that Justin Neely is going to be able to keep this UNC Greensboro team lively. Gaten Vasco, who is a solid 3-point shooter over at Central Michigan last season, he's shooting just 28.5% from 3-point range for this Wofford team. You've had Jane Taylor in and out of the lineup as well in that backcourt, so I do think that Greensboro going to start to slow down and hold in there in a game where I think that possessions are going to be a little bit more at a premium. Semi-total 145.5. I like the under, and at 6+, we'll take those points with Greensboro. 667, 668, it is Maryland, and they play us Indiana. Indiana is a road favorite here, as you're going to be laying between 7.5 and 8.5 points with them. 148.5 to 149.5 is the total, and I still about lied at 7, so at a 7.5+, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Maryland. Now, if you look at the overall season numbers, this is a Maryland team that's playing quite up-tempo in terms of total possessions per game. They check in 106th, but you'll notice in their last 5 games, they're playing at a rate of about 5 possessions per game fewer than they did to begin this season. And you've got an Indiana team that's rather slow and controlled, about 180th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And Indiana has been very good on the defensive side of things, 29th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, albeit they are giving up 19 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. But for Indiana, you've got some very good versatility in this lineup, as you've obviously got the coach's son in Tucker DeVries, give 15.5 points, 5.5 boards, 3 assists. He shoots in the mid-30s from 3, and Lamar Wilkerson has become that go-to scorer, 19 points per game, shoots 42% from 3. Nick Dorn has also been able to shoot about 45% from 3-point range, but the real forte of this Indiana team has been really taking care of the ball on offense. Top 70 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and all their percentages are good. They're a top 65 team in terms of their free throw shooting percentage, 2-point shooting, and 3-point shooting percentage. And then on the defensive side of things, top 45 team in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. But I do think that Maryland is going to be able to hold in there. We did see Indiana play, let's call it what it is, not necessarily the strongest on-conference schedule. And with this Maryland bunch, they have really been able to turn things around on the glass with Solomon Washington coming back. Missed the first 8 games of the season, 10 points, 9 rebounds per game in the 6 games that he's actually played. In David Hewitt, he's been rock solid, 13.5 points, shoots 42.5% from 3-point range. For Al Payne, the Payne train is currently out of the fold, so that has been hurting them offensively a little bit, but we've had Darius Adams in the backcourt step up for about 12.5 points per game. Could use him to shoot a little bit better than 25% from 3-point range. And this has been an Indiana team that has been doing a very solid job in terms of just finding good looks in general. They are facing a Maryland team that is outside the top 200 right now in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but much of that came away from them. They've been giving up 12 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than in a road/neutral court setting. And with Solomon Washington coming back, I do think that things are going to be slowing down in Maryland games. And additionally, for this Maryland team, they've been a top 75 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis in their home games. Miles Rice coming back, being able to give this team a bit more in the backcourt with 8 points per game, I think is going to be just enough for them to remain lively in a game that I think is going to be a little bit more defense oriented. So I told 147, I like the under, and at anything above 7, we'll take those points with Maryland. 669, 670 on the card. Xavier is going to be on the road facing off against Marquette, and Marquette is a favorite of 4.5 to 5.5 points. 156.5 to 157.5 is the total, and with Marquette, I set them as a favorite of 4 points. So 4.5 plus, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Xavier. This is a Marquette team that just has not really been able to execute in anything whatsoever. Now, Xavier, they are about 153rd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but Marquette is right there at 157th, despite the fact that Marquette has been a solid turnover team. Top 50 team in terms of turnovers force on a per possession basis, but for lack of a better term, they gamble for turnovers. Now they face a Xavier team that has been in the top 18 in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Xavier has been rough when they've gotten to the free throw line. They're about 300th in the country at 68%, but they do a relatively solid job of shooting 35% from three-point range, with Drake caroling all the way to 16 points, 5 boards, 3.5 assists per game. And then Philip Rochevin, he's been really versatile. 9 points, 8 boards, 4 assists, stealing half per contest. Doesn't really pop it and lock it well from three-point range, but Xavier, they're also a top 25 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They only allow 9 offensive rebounds per game, and this is a Marquette team that's just not necessarily the world's greatest on the glass. They've been outside the top 200 with regards to rebound percentage. You do have Ben Gold giving you about 6.5 rebounds, 8.5 points per game, but lone guy on the roster that gives you above 4.7 rebounds per game. Chase Ross has been good. 16 points, 3 assists. He doesn't necessarily shoot it well from 3, and that's just his whole Marquette team. 29.9% from three-point range for a team that's supposed to be centered around the backcourt. They're outside the top 300 in terms of both 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Top 125 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, but they give it back up on the defensive glass as well. This Marquette team has been outside the top 175 in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, but I do think that they're going to be able to generate a few turnovers here. It's been a Xavier team has been quite suspect with regards to their offense when they've been away from home as well. This is a Xavier team that, even though they do a nice job in terms of taking care of the ball, they just don't make the most out of their possessions as they're outside the top 275 with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage. So I do think that that costs you an over, especially in a game where both of these teams are playing fast, but not necessarily warp speed fast. 110th in terms of total possessions per game for Xavier. Marquette more around about 66. So I did set a total here of a 152. I like the under end at anything of 4.5 plus. We'll take those points with Xavier. 671, 672 on the card. It is Missouri on the road against Kentucky. Big Blue Nation is a pretty sizable favorite here of 11.5 to 12.5 points. 152.5 to 153.5 is the total. And I do like the points here with Missouri. I set them as a underdog of 10.5 points. Missouri has been one of the most efficient offenses in all of college basketball. They rank 42nd in terms of points per possession. Now, you want to be noting this. This is a bunch that is averaging, and I'm not even kidding here, about 28 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're away from home rather than at home. Clearly some good home court advantage, Aaron. For Kentucky, even though their 3-point shooting percentage has been all wonky, out of whack, what have you, this team still ranks 40th in the country in terms of raw points scored on a per possession basis, and they've been able to do a pretty rock solid job in their home games, being in the top 55 still with that regard, even with that game against Gonzaga taking into account everything like that. Thought that was a game out there in Nashville, Tennessee, technically. But for Kentucky, the big thing is they do need to get Ortega Owe going a little bit more, because he was supposed to be taking some big strides forward for this team. He's still been able to give the team about 14 to 15 points per game, but shooting in the low 30s from 3. And this is a Missouri team that is a top 75 team with their 3-point shooting percentage, with Jacob Cruz headlining that, 50% 3-point shooter, 14 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. Mark Mitchell is giving you 17 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. And for Missouri, they are much improved on the glass. They become a top 100 team in terms of rebound percentage. I believe that is the first time in the Dennis Gates era, as this team typically is just getting absolutely blown away there. And this year, they've been able to do a better job in terms of preventing those second and third chances. Top 100 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. But on the flip side of things, you now have Jaden Quanten's back for this Kentucky team, as he was averaging 2.5 blocks per contest when he was over at Arizona State 8 seasons ago. Still is not back to full force or anything like that, but should help out a Kentucky team that has been good on the glass. 41st in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Even if you're not getting a ton of Quantens in this game, you've had the freshman and Malachi Moreno, who stands 7 feet tall, do a relatively solid job. Stephen Sachi, he's been supplying 8.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. They dealt with an injury to Mohamed Diabate. He's back. He's giving you 11.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. A little bit of versatility, not a ton, but Denzel Aberdeen, he's sort of been that do-it-all sort of player for this team. 11 points, 3 boards, 3 assists. From 3-point shoots about 34% from 3, but I just don't know if this team is going to be able to convert enough threes to be able to get the job done. It's actually been a Kentucky defense that has been rock solid. They've been a top 70 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and neither of these teams are necessarily playing at warp speed. You've got a Kentucky team that typically they do like to play fast. They're down to about 162nd in terms of total possessions per game. Missouri is 194th. I think that this has a propensity to be just efficient enough for Missouri to be able to get you the over. I did set my total at a 154.5, so you're at a 152.5 153.5. I do like the over. And with Missouri, I'm willing to take 11 plus with them. 693, 694 on the card. It is Richmond. They are on the road against St. Bonaventure. The Bonnies are a 5.5 to a 6.5 point home favorite. 150.5 to 151.5 is the total. St. Bonaventure is a 5.5 point favorite. So at 6 plus, that does become my buy point on Richmond. And you do have a Richmond team that's playing quite a bit faster than they have in past seasons, up to the top 150 in terms of total possessions per game. Bonaventure is not really a super fast team, but they're a little bit faster than they have been in the past. About 247th of the country in terms of total possessions per game. And for St. Bonaventure, this team has been doing a very good job in terms of generating turnovers as they bring in Darrell Simmons, who's been shooting just below 40% from three, 15 plus points per contest. He's really been the head of the snake of a team that has been able to do a great job with that regard. A top 140 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, you've got a Richmond team that they've ascended into being a top 75 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis in a road/neutral court setting. And both of these teams are relatively solid in terms of not allowing second and third chances. Jonathan Beagle has been able to do a nice job with his versatility over at Richmond. He stands about 6'10", 6'11", and right now he's been supplying the team with about 7 points, 5 boards, but gives out a pair of assists per game. AJ Lopez has been able to shoot 41% from 3 for a Richmond team that overall they become a top 40 team with their 3-point shooting percentage at about 37.5%. Richmond not going to give themselves a lot of second and third chances outside the top 2 in terms of offensive rebound percentage, but they do a nice job in terms of not allowing those second and third chances as well. Top 150 team in terms of their overall rebound percentage, and with the St. Bonaventure team, they do have a double-double machine that I think is going to be very hard to match up with as they bring in one Mitchell, Sir Frank Mitchell, leading the way with 17 points, 11 boards, and does give out 2.5 assists per game as well. Outside of Darrell Simmons, you do have Daniel Igbenegbu shooting 40% from 3, 9 points per game, and St. Bonaventure finally going with a little bit more depth. I know that Amari Marshall has dealt with a little bit of injury, but seems like he should be good to go here. He played in the game on the 31st for them, so I think that he should be able to give you something, though he might be a little bit, shall we say, hampered. And then Deshaun Bowen, he's been able to give the team 8.5 points, right around about 4 assists per contest, so he's been able to do a rock-solid job with that regard as well. I do think that for St. Bonaventure, they find a way to be able to get the job done in this game, but this Bonnie's team has been outside the top 200 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and even though Bonaventure is a really good 3-point shooting team, top 40 team shooting 37.7% from 3, they're outside the top 300 in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 3-point range. They very much look to pile drive the ball down low. They've been outside the top 200 with that regard, and for Bonaventure, outside the top 200 in terms of their own ball security, so I think that you get a little bit of a sloppier game. So my total I had a 147.5, so I like the under, and at 6 plus, taking those points with Richmond, 675, 676. It is Duquesne. They're going to be on the road against St. Joe's. St. Joe's hopes to not be average Joe's as 2.5 point home underdogs. 152.5 is the total, and for St. Joe's, set the Mets 3.5 point underdogs. I'm going to be willing to lay with Duquesne. Duquesne to begin the year was just playing too fast for their own good, and they're still 33rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but they've slowed down a little bit more in their last 5 games, which I think is very encouraging because the right around 15 turnovers per game outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis has been less than tremendous for the team. Now down to 14 turnovers per game, but still well outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. You've got John Hughley right now dealing with an injury, but Jimmy Williams has stepped up in a big way. 15 points, 4.5 boards, shoots 39.5% from 3, and then Terrence Gunyard, a 43% 3-point shooter. This is a team that as a whole has been able to do a really good job with regards to 3-point shooting, and Duquesne about a country average team in terms of generating turnovers. Not great, not terrible there, and St. Joseph should be able to win that battle as they've actually done a relatively good job in terms of taking care of the ball. They're not going to generate a lot of turnovers themselves, and for St. Joe's, they've been one of the better shot blocking teams in all of college basketball. You've got a big man in Justice Sajabor only gives you right around about 4.5 points, 4 rebounds per game, but he gives you right around 2 blocks per contest. Here's the issue that you've got for St. Joe's. So 361st in 3-point shooting percentage at 26.4%. It's just not great to say the least. Meanwhile, it's a Duquesne team that on the road is shooting about 38% from 3-point range. That's a top 55 mark in all of college basketball. And it's not as if the St. Joe's team has been like some sort of a magical team in terms of guarding the arc themselves. They're about 241st in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, albeit 26.8% at home, 40.7% away from home. I think that that's going to be ironing out a little bit more, but it's going to be on Duquesne to be able to really guard things inside because the St. Joe's team just has not had any sort of outside shooting. And it's a Duquesne team that is about country average in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Their own 2-point shooting percentage has been in the top 40 in all of college basketball. Jacob Desis give you about 8 points, 6 rebounds per game, so he's been able to do a pretty rock-solid job there. And then when it comes to St. Joseph's, they are currently without one of their top scorers as Deuce Jones just decided to leave the program. He was averaging averaging 16 points per game. He was their top scorer, so that's rough. But you've got Derek Simpson, who's able to give you about 10.5 points per game. He only shoots 23% from three-point range, and Jane Glover is pretty much a lone guy on the roster. He shoots above 32.5% from three, 38% three-point shooter, 14.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game, and St. Joe's really good at giving themselves second chances. Top 65 team towards the percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but with the way that they just don't bury threes and the way that they just don't force the issue, they're outside the top 290 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. I do think that Duquesne goes out there, gets the job done. I set Duquesne as a 3.5 point favorite, so willing to lay up to 3 with them. I think that Duquesne continues to slow things down a little bit more. Set my total at 149.5, especially with that St. Joe's 3-point shooting, so I'm in on the under. 677, 678 on the card. It is Marshall. They are going to be on the road against James Madison. James Madison between a pick'em to a 1.5 point favorite. 157.5 to 158.5 is the total. I did set James Madison as a 1.5 point favorite. This opened up as a pick'em. If this gets to like a 2 between like a pick'em and a 2, I would rather just take James Madison as a pick'em personally, but I'm going to be in on the under. I did set my total at a 149.5. You've got a Marshall squad that is playing quite fast in terms of total possessions per game, about 93rd in the country. And James Madison, at their roots, you've said that they want to play a little bit more slowly, 229th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. But if you look at their home games and their home games only, they're outside the top 320 in terms of total possessions per game. And for James Madison, they've been able to do a nice job in terms of mixing and matching in the backcourt. You've been able to have Bradley Douglas do a nice job, step it up for the team, 14 points, 4.5 assists per contest. From 3-point range, he shoots about 35.5% from 3. Cliff Davis, 36.5% 3-point shooter. He's been rock solid there, and in the case of Douglas, also gives you about 4.5 assists per game. James Madison, typically they do a nice job on the glass, but have been outside the top 175 with regards to that rebound percentage. It's been a little bit of an uncharacteristically rough James Madison defense, but it does feel like things are starting to really be able to reverse course for them. In conference play, they've been shooting over 60% from 2-point range as well, so they're very much looking to pile drive the ball down low a little bit more as well. And on the flip side of things, you do have a Marshall team that they began the year very sloppy with the ball. They've been able to rectify some of those turnovers, but still outside the top 240 in terms of ball security. You do have Jalen Spear in the backcourt, give you 15 points, 6 assists, shoots 37% from 3-point range, and then you've gotten great production out of Caleb Hollenbeck in the backcourt, shooting 43% from 3, 8 points per contest, but this team is built around the 7'4" big man in Matthew Van Komen, who's been supplying 8.5 points, 7.5 boards, 2.7 blocks per contest. And for Marshall, top 25 team in all of college basketball in terms of block shot percentage. You've got James Madison team that's the top 40 team in terms of shot block percentage, with Eddie Ricks give you over a block, 6.5 rebounds per game down low. And for Marshall, they have been a top 85 unit in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, country average team in terms of being able to guard the arc. But I do think that Marshall just going to be a little bit too sloppy with the ball, even though this James Madison team really doesn't force the issue. They are outside the top 340 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but do think that in the end, this is going to be a little bit more of a slow down game that James Madison just barely is able to eke out. Set by total 149.5. I like the under, and with James Madison, we'll take them as a pick'em / a 1-point favorite. 679, 680 on the card. George Mason is going to be on the road against Fordham. Fordham is a home underdog. You're going to be catching with them 5.5 points, 134.5 to 135.5 is the total. And I set George Mason as an 8.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. You've got two teams that are very much built around defense and two teams that are not looking to play very fast. Fordham, as a matter of fact, 360th in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. George Mason, more around about 307th, and these are identical defenses in terms of efficiency. Fordham 53rd in points allowed on a per possession basis. George Mason is 54th, but the X factor here, George Mason and their 3-point shooting. As Fordham, they are 331st in 3-point shooting percentage at 29%. George Mason right now shooting 41.2% away from home. That goes down a little bit at home, but they're still a top 85 team with regards to that 3-point shooting percentage. And for George Mason, Corey Mincy coming out over from Presbyterian has been the X factor. 17.5 points, 3.5 assists. Right now shoots 44% from 3. Jahari Long shoots 46% from 3, 11.5 points per game. It's a George Mason team that's really not going to force a lot of turnovers, but they just don't allow you to be able to get off good looks. They've been a top 85 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage as well. So a Fordham team that is looking to knife the ball inside, they're going to have a little bit of issue there. Now, I do like for Fordham what DeJour Reeves brings to the table. 16.5 points, 4.5 boards, 4 assists. He only shoots about 31% from 3-point range. Team as a whole, again, 29%. That's not necessarily great, but Christian Henry, 5.5 assists per game. That's been rock solid. Fordham, a little bit of ball security issues outside the top 200 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but also a very strong team down low. They've been a top 50 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They're allowing teams to grab just 7.9 offensive rebounds per game. They've been a top 30 defensive rebound percentage team. They've been a top 35 2-point shooting percentage team, but they are outside the country average in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. So I do think that George Mason is going to be able to utilize that to their advantage, especially in a game that should feature very few free throws. Fordham is a bottom 25 team in terms of free throws attempted on per possession basis on offense, top 20 team in terms of not allowing free throw attempts on defense. So I think that this is a slow and controlled game that George Mason finds a way to win with their perimeter shooting. So I'm going to be willing to lay up to 8 here with George Mason, and I'm going to be in on that under as well. So my total at 128.5, 681, 682. It is Miami. They're going to be on the road against Wake Forest, and Wake Forest finds themselves as a very slim favorite in some spots of 1.5. This is out flipped to some places having Miami as a 1.5 point favorite, and totals between 155 to 155.5, and some I total 156.5. I do like the over. You've got two teams that are looking to play fast. They're maybe not ridiculously fast, but still, it's a Miami team that's currently 77th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Wake Forest is 44th, and the big key for this Wake Forest team is turnovers. They become a top 30 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and to the credit of Wake Forest, they're doing a nice job with their perimeter defense. They are 56th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. The issue that they're going to be running into in this game is that Miami's not really a team that shoots a bunch of threes. For Miami, they're 51st in the country in terms of percentage of their shots that come from two-point range, and that actually goes up way in that a lot in a road/shoot-score environment. In a road/shoot-score environment, that's actually a top 30 mark. They take over 69% of their shots away from home inside the three-point line, and with Miami, you've been able to get great production out of Malik Reneau. About 20.5 points, 6.8 boards, shoots in the mid-30s from three-point. Miami is not like a bad three-point shooting team at 35.2%. Not amazing, and the one thing that they are going to need to work on, free throw shooting percentage, and that's why I did set Wake Forest as a 2.5 point favorite. In a nip and tuck spot, you have a Miami team that shoots 67.2% at the free throw line, that is outside the top 300 in all of college basketball. Now, this has been a Miami team that's been very dominant on the glass. They're currently 12th in the country in terms of rebound percentage, but that does take a nice size tumble away from home, and Wake Forest is only about 139th, but Trayvon Spillers being able to give you 5.5 plus rebounds per game. Drew Karras, 19 plus points per contest. He throws in their 5 plus boards. These guys have been pretty rock solid. Flip side for Miami, Drew Washington in the backcourt, 13.5 points, shoots 37% from 3. Like what I'm seeing there, and for Miami, they've been a solid team in terms of generating turnovers as well. They're a top 50 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. They're a top 85 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and Wake Forest can be a little bit careless with the ball. They've been outside the top 150 in terms of their ball security, but like what Miles Colvin brings to the table, shooting 37.5% from three-point range, 13.5 points per game, Wake Forest has been quite rough down low, by the way. They are outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, so I think that helps you all the more to the over, but this has been a Wake Forest team that has been solid at the free throw line. They're a top 55 team with regards to their own free throw shooting percentage, so I do think that that's going to be able to help out quite a bit. I think that Wake is going to be able to generate some turnovers. I think Miami gets what they want inside, but I do think that Wake Forest, having a guy in Nate Calmezzi really stepping up, shooting 37% from 3, 9 points, 94% free throw shooter, and each of your top 4 scorers for Wake Forest all shooting at least 78% at the free throw line against a Miami team that is really not afraid to put you on the free throw line. I think that is going to be just enough for the team to be able to get the job done, so I did set Wake Forest as a favorite here of 2.5 points. I'm going to be willing to take them either as a money line underdog or a 1.5 point favorite, and like the over, semi-total 156.5, 683, 684 on the card. Florida International is going to be playing us to Jacksonville State, and Jacksonville State finds themselves as a very slim favorite here. You're going to be laying with them 1.5 points, 148.5 is the total. I set a total of a 143. I do like the under. You've got a Florida International team that's going to be very much looking to play up tempo, 42nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Jacksonville State the exact opposite at 348th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. So you've got a good old-fashioned tempo war here, and for Jacksonville State, typically strong on the glass, or more around country averages here in terms of their rebound percentage. And Florida International, this has typically been a team that has been pretty rough with regards to rebounding. They're doing a little bit of a better job this year. They are allowing a lot of second and third chances, but they themselves have been able to do a pretty solid job in terms of being able to find a way to be able to hit the offensive board. So I do like what I'm seeing there with this Florida National team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that do become an offensive rebound. They're currently 77th in all of college basketball, but even with them being able to shoot now above 35% from three-point range, and having a guy in Corey Stevenson, he comes over from the Meep Roadrunners of Cal State Bakersfield. He has really been the main man for this team, as right now he's supplying 18 points, 7 boards, pair of assists, shoots 46% from three-point range. I still do think that Jacksonville State finds a way to be able to get the job done outright here, as you do have a Florida National team that's back in the top 40 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and this has been a unit that's been a bit better with their defense. They're a top 175 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, but while this Florida National team, I highlighted the fact that they do a nice job in terms of hauling in their second and third chances. They're going to give you a bunch of second and third chances as well. About 345th of the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Teams are rebounding about 35.8% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound, and I think that plays very much to a just tough-nosed Ray Harper coach team over there at Jacksonville State, where you've got Mustafa El Montequil, give you 18 points, 7.5 boards. Not necessarily a guy that's going to go into flamethrower mode from 3, but AC Bryant is. He shoots 41% from 3 on 8 threes per contest, 14 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. And then you've got Amadric Erkins-Ford, who's been able to give you 8.5 points, 4.5 boards. He shoots in the mid-30s from 3-point range. As a whole is greater than some of its parts collective for Jacksonville State. Jacksonville State back outside the top 250 in terms of their turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they don't generate a lot of turnovers because instead they're just focusing on making sure that you are not going to get good clean looks. In terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentages, has been one of the best mid-major teams in all of college basketball. Jacksonville State right now is allowing teams at home to shoot just 20.2% from 3-point range, and they're a top 100 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage as well. I think that wins out. I think that allows Jacksonville State to be able to slow this game down. I saw my total at 143, so I'm in on the under, and I do like Jacksonville State here. Made them a 3-point favorite. 685, 686 on the card. Oklahoma is on the road against Mississippi State. Mississippi State is a 1.5 point favorite in a lot of spots. One spot I'm seeing them as the underdog of 1.5 points. 159.5 is the total line. As a Mississippi State as 1.5 point favorite. So one or less slash them as an underdog. I'm going to be one to take Mississippi State, but do like this total under. I saw my total on 153.5. Now you do have a Mississippi State team that's now in the top 75 in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Oklahoma's more of a mid-tempo team at 195th, and for Oklahoma, they are 11th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but they are scoring more than 20 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. But what this team does a great job of is their interior defense. They're 25th in the country in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and they themselves are a top 30 team with their own 2-point shooting percentage. This is despite the fact that their forte is in the backcourt. Xavier Brown and Nigel Pack, they're packing it in with a combined about 32 points per game. Brown shoots 36% from 3 with ACL and per contest. Pack is shooting 46% from 3-point range, and for Oklahoma, really good at taking care of the ball. Top 20 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and Mississippi State has gotten better in terms of taking care of the ball, but it's still been a little bit suspect here. They're still outside the top 125 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and they're back outside the top 200 with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage. This is despite Jaden Epps really going to beast mode recently. He's been able to give you 16.5 points per contest overall for the season, but he's now been able to supply at least 18 points in 6 out of the last 7 games, so he's starting to find it. Joshua Hubbard has been the main scorer, 36.5% 3-point shooter, 22.5 points, 3.8 assists per contest. And Jabari McGee does shoot 45% from 3, 9.5 points per contest, but this is also a Mississippi State team that they have been giving up a lot of second and third chances outside the top 200 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and with Mississippi State, the one thing that they've been able to do a good job of is being able to guard the arc. They've been a top 125 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, so that's been able to help them out quite a bit, and this has been an Oklahoma unit that has been a little bit down with their 3-point shooting defense, but I look at them being a top 25 unit from a season ago, and I do think that them being outside the top 250 right now is a little bit of a mirage. I do think that that's going to be going downward just a little bit, and I do think that this is going to be a bit more of a nip and tuck game. I do think that this is going to be a slow down game, as you're going to have Oklahoma get plenty of clean possessions, Mississippi outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but I do think that a Mississippi State team that when they've been at their best, they've really relied upon their big men. Right now you've got Sean Jones along with Sergei Makura, give you 5 rebounds per game, Quincy Ballard, a block, 7.5 rebounds per game. I think that is going to be the forte that they utilize to get the job done here against Muhammad Wagyu of Oklahoma, who's been able to give you about 7.5 rebounds per game. So, circumstance where I did somebody total 153.5. I like the under at the Mississippi State, willing to lay up to a point with them. 687, 688 on the card. Western Carolina is going to be on the road against Samford, and Sam Amford finds themselves as a mid-tier favorite here. You're laying between 6.5 and 7.5 points. 152.5 is the total, and with Samford, made them the 7.5 point favorite. So, I'm going to be willing to lay up to 7 with them. For Western Carolina, the name of the game for them is that they just need to start taking care of the ball outside the top 310 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Now, the good news is they go up against the Samford team that they are not going to be forcing the issue. This is not a team that's generating any turnovers whatsoever. The bad news is Samford is really good at taking care of the ball. They are 11th in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and with the Samford team under Lenny Acuff, I do think that the 3-point shooting is going to start to turn around a little bit. Right now for Samford, they're shooting as a collective only about 31.7% from 3-point range. That's about 262nd in all of college basketball, and Western Carolina, they are right there, 283rd in the country in terms of 3-point shooting percentage, but I did make a total of a 153.5. I'm in on the over because with Samford, they're not going to force as many turnovers as a lot of defenses on Western Carolina. Western Carolina, top 70 team in terms of total possessions per game, and Western Carolina has done a really good job on the glass as well. You've got Marcus Kell, who's right now supplying 13 points, 4.5 rebounds per game, and we really only have 2 guys on the roster that give you over 4.5 rebounds per game. Emmanuel Data has been able to give you 5 point, 2 points, 6.2 rebounds per game, and then Abdul Fantakeba has been able to give you 6.5 points, 7.3 boards, throws in there a little bit over a block per contest, but with this bunch, I've been very impressed by the way that they're not allowing opponents to be able to grab a lot of second and third chances. Meanwhile, they themselves have done a solid job here. Western Carolina about 77th in the country in terms of their defensive rebound percentage. Meanwhile, on the offensive glass, they're grabbing about 29% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. Meanwhile, this has been a Samford team that's been a little bit rough in terms of grabbing second and third chances, but they themselves are not allowing opponents to be able to grab a lot of second and third chances for Samford outside the top 3 with regards to their offensive rebound percentage. But with the way that they keep things clean, I think that that's going to be very big in this spot. And Jaden Booth has been a nice coach who scored 19 points on 40% 3-point shooting. And then Cade Norris shoots 35% from 3, 8 points per contest with Samford. They have been a top 100 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And with Western Carolina really struggling from 3, that's big because Samford, they've been outside the top 3 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage with Samford. I do think that they find a way to be able to hold up inside. I do think that Samford's 3-point shooting is going to start to go upward a little bit as this is a top 45 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 3-point range. And with this Western Carolina defense, they are allowing teams to shoot from 3-point range more around about 37.5%. They're outside the top 340. So I do think that that's going to be just enough for you to get the over. Some I told 153.5. So at the 152.5, I like the over. And with the Samford team, I'm willing to lay up to 7 with them. 689, 690 on the card. St. Louis is going to be on the road against VCU. VCU is a favorite of 1.5 points. 168.5 to 169.5 is the total. And with VCU, I did set them as the favorite of 2 points. I'm going to be willing to lay a 1.5 with them. Now you've got two teams that are very much going to be looking to push some tempo here. VCU is about 102nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and you got a St. Louis team that is 34th in the country. The big thing for St. Louis, and they've been much better about this in the last few games, but they still are turning the ball over a little bit too much. They're outside the top 175 in terms of their ball security. Now St. Louis is doing a great job in terms of giving themselves second and third chances, especially games played away from home. They're a top 12 team in terms of percentage of the missed shots that become an offensive rebound in a roadside-shoot court venue, and this is even with Robbie Avila being in a smaller role than expected. He's back to being the team's top scorer, 12.9 points, 4 boards, 4 assists. You'd expect those numbers to be better, but he does shoot now 46% from 3-point. Trey Green is shooting 45.5% from the outside. St. Louis as a whole shoots 38.5% from 3. That's a top 35 mark in all of college basketball, and they're a top 30 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage as well. Meanwhile, you've got a VCU team that is very much as a whole is greater than some of its parts approach as well. You really don't have anyone that gives you over about 13.5 points per contest, as Terrence Hill is actually up to now 14 points per game. But then you've got a trio of guys, Nick Lewis, Laser Djokovic, and JD and Tracy, all at about 10.2 to 13.3 points per contest. Tracy shoots 39.5% from 3, and VCU, also a good 3-point shooting team. They are shooting 37.5% from the outside. Need to work on that perimeter defense as they've been outside the top 260 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, so that's a little bit of an issue for them. But the one thing that this team has been able to do a pretty rock-solid job of is being able to generate turnovers. This is a VCU team that is in the top 125 in terms of turnovers forced on a per-possession basis. St. Louis just not going to be doing quite as much of that. 229th in all of college basketball in that regard. And for what VCU does not necessarily do a great job of with regards to being able to guard the perimeter, they have been able to do a solid job of on the inside. This is a VCU team that's still a top 100 team in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. And to the surprise of many people, St. Louis is actually 25th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. So I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a lower scoring game. I'm in on the under, but this is a VCU team in the top 75 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. VCU has been a top 100 team with regards to rebound percentage. I think that they do just enough in terms of generating turnovers and having that versatility of someone like Barry Evans, 9 points, 5 boards, 2.5 assists. That's going to be able to stand up to a guy in St. Louis that has been able to do a really good job of stuffing the stat sheet himself, and Deion Brown, who's been supplying about 13 points, 6.5 boards. You've got two teams that are just very well rounded, and I do think that in the end, the defenses do step up a little bit more. So I'm in on the under, and with VCU, I think home court reigns supreme. Set them as a 2-point favorite, willing to lay that very small number. 691, 692. It is Providence. They are going to be playing us to UConn. UConn is a road favorite, 10.5 points. 151.5 to 152.5 is the total, and I did set my total at a 154, so I'm going to be in on this total over. And with Providence, I'm going to be willing to take the points. Set this line at 10, so I do need that hook, but I do like Providence in this ordeal. In my opinion, Providence has one of the more underrated home court advantages in all of college basketball at the Dunk. I think that they call it Amica Fieldhouse now. It's the Dunkin' Donuts Center. We all know that, but with Providence, I do like the backcourt plays. You've got Jason Edwards, Jalen Sellers, who've been able to combine for 34 points per contest, and Sellers shoots 92% the free throw line, 42.5% from 3-point range, and Edwards a little bit more of that main facilitator, 3.4 assists per game, and then you've got Oswin down low, who gives you 3 blocks per contest. Can't pronounce the last name. This has been a Providence team that has been rather rough with regards to rebounding outside the top 125 in terms of rebound percentage. Darius Reed on the flip side for UConn is 7+ rebounds per game. That should be able to win out down low, but even though this team doesn't necessarily dominate the boards, what they have been able to do a solid job of is the opponent's two-point shooting percentage. It's right now for Providence, they do find themselves in the top 50 with that regard. Where they've really been vulnerable is giving up a lot of open looks from three-point range. Right now, Providence is allowing teams to shoot over 36.2% from three-point range. That's a little bit of an issue, and for this UConn team, they are going to be able to do a pretty rock-solid job in terms of finding some looks there, but they've been a country average team with their three-point shooting percentage at 34.4% now. They're allowing teams to shoot 25.5% for three, both at home and on the road. That's a top 5 mark in all of college basketball. Not unreasonable to think that there's going to be a little bit of regression there. And Solo Ball, who last year was a 40% three-point shooter, more on 29.7% from three, 15.5 points per game. Do you think that that improves a little bit? Alex Caravan has been your main three-point shooter at 41.5%, 13.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. And then Malachi Smith has coming off the bench. He's a 40+% three-point shooter, only 5 points per game, but 3.8 assists per contest. UConn doing a pretty solid job on the turnover front, a top 150 team in terms of turnovers force on a per possession basis, and top 125 team in terms of taking care of the ball, but not really generating for themselves a ton of second chances. So I do think that Providence, who has been a little bit rough in terms of giving up those offensive rebounds, they give up darn near 14 offensive rebounds per game. That is a bottom 25 mark in all of college basketball. That they're going to be a little bit better here, and you're going to have a tempo war as well. UConn about 269th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. You've got a Providence team that has really sped themselves up 11th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. I do think that UConn, as per usual, going to be able to do a rock-solid job on defense, and I don't think that they're in danger of just not getting the job done outright or anything like that, but do think that the number has went just a little bit too far. So I did set my line at 10. I'm going to be willing to take 10.5 plus here with Providence, and with regards to the total, I did set mine at a 154, so I'm also liking the over as well. 693, 694 on the betting board. It is Missouri State on the road against Kennesaw St. We give our Odele Kiffin go Owls, as Kennesaw State is 4.5 to a 5.5 point favorite. 148.5 is the total. I did set a total here of a 151.5. I like the over. Kennesaw State, third in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Missouri State, the absolute opposite. Right now, they are outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game at 318th. And for Missouri State, prior to that game against New Mexico State, they were a bottom 5 team in all of college basketball in terms of their three-point shooting percentage. Last year, as a collective, with much of the same core, they shot 36% from three. So I do think the positivity continues to come for this bunch, but I said, you've got a Kennesaw State team that they do a superb job of giving themselves second and third chances. 17th in the country in terms of offensive rebound percentage. They're grabbing about 37.3% of their misses as an offensive rebound. And for this Missouri State team, they've been outside the top 240 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. You've been able to get a lot of production out of Keith Pollock, 17 points, 7 boards. He's not a great three-point shooter, but Kobe Williams was really able to go off in that New Mexico State game, 14 points. He's shooting 38.5% from three-point range. And then we got Michael O.C. Banusu, give you about 6.5 boards, 12.5 points per game, dealt with a little bit of injury. He's back in the fold. They've still been dealing with the injury to Omar Kuljovic. That's a big reason why they've been a little bit more fragile on the glass. That said, they've been able to get some relatively good production as well out of Darian Sutton, who's been able to spy about 5.5 rebounds per game. But I mean, one of the guys that returns from the season ago has just been cold with his three-point shooting. Is Zaxton King. He's been able to give you 9.5 points. Right now, shooting 23% from three-point range. Again, I do think that they're doing for a little bit of positivity there. And we were for Missouri State. They're okay in being able to give themselves a few second and third chances when they've been away from home is where it's really went sour. They're only grabbing about 20% of their misses as an offensive rebound away from home compared to 30% at home. Again, number that I think irons out a little bit, but I do think that Simeon Cottle is going to do a nice job of leading the way for his Kennesaw State bunch as he's been the main scorer. He's putting up their 19 points, 3.3 assists, shoots about 38.5% from three. And Kennesaw State overall in their games against D1 and D1 competition, they shoot 33% from three. That's below country average, but the team is very much looking to be able to drive the ball inside as they've been a top 175 team in both their own two-point shooting percentage, and then they've been one of the best in terms of being able to guard things inside as well. And this is a Missouri State team that they are very content to be driving the ball down low. They don't necessarily attempt a ton of threes, so the fact that Kennesaw State here in this ordeal, they rank in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage 45th in all of college basketball. If you look at their home games and their home games only, that goes into the top 30. I do think that that's going to be very big as for Missouri State, they've done a much better job taking care of the ball. They become a top 175 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. You do have a Kennesaw team that's had a little bit of difficulty there, but Missouri State not necessarily doing the world's most amazing job of being able to generate turnovers as well. So I do think that you're going to get a little bit more of an up and down game. And with Missouri State doing a little bit of a better job with their three-point shooting, doing for a little bit of positivity. I do think they get plenty of points up on the board, but I think that for Kennesaw State, those second chances that you're going to get out of Brandon Skip-to-my-Lou, who's able to give you 11.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per contest. Frank Juan Sherman, about 8 points, 8 rebounds. Trey Simpson has been able to give you about 5 boards. I think that that's just going to be too much in this ordeal, and I do think that Kennesaw State does find a way to persevere and get the job done. And Kennesaw State, also a top 50 team in terms of free throw attempts on a per possession basis. So set by a total at a 151.5. I like the over, and with Kennesaw, made them a 9.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay that number. 695, 696 on the card. Belmont is on the road against Northern Iowa. Northern Iowa, a mid-tier favorite here as they're laying 2.5 points on all game, 135.5, and going to be willing to lay it. I said Northern Iowa as a 4.5 point favorite. You got a tempo war here. Belmont 78th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Northern Iowa 355th. And for Belmont, what has really been the weakness for this team has been turnovers. As this is a Belmont team that has much improved on defense. They're actually now into the top 60 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but 327th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and that really is big in this case, as Northern Iowa has been really good in terms of perimeter defense. Number 1 in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentages. Teams are shooting just 24.5% from 3 against them. That should be going northward, but this has also been a team that overall is 60th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. That leaps into the top 45 when they are at home, and I do think that they're going to be able to control the tenor of this game, as you've got Leon Bond in the backcourt, began his career over at Virginia, doing a solid job supplying about 12.5 points, 5.5 boards, pair of assists, a steal per contest, and he shoots 44.5% from 3. And then Trey Campbell, main guy in terms of generating those turnovers, 2 steals, 3.5 assists, 13 points. He shoots 35.5% from 3. Overall, it's a Northern Iowa team that has been a top 85 team with regards to their three-point shooting percentage. They shoot about 36.5% from the outside, and this is a Belmont team that has Tyler Lundblade shooting over 40% from 3, 15 plus points per contest. Sam Mormay, 6 plus boards, 15 plus points. He's a mid-30s three-point shooter as well, and for this Belmont team, they're still a really good team from the outside. Number 5 in the country in terms of their three-point shooting percentage, which goes up to 46.6% in a road/neutral-court venue. That is number 2 in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, for Northern Iowa, they actually only shoot about 32% from 3 at home compared to 37.7% away from home. I do think that that's a number that is going to be ironing out a little bit. And then Mr. Nick McLean for Belmont has been able to do a nice job in terms of facilitating the offense at 8 points, 4.3 boards, 6.5 assists, and he shoots 45% from 3-point range. It is a situation of something you got to give. An amazing three-point Belmont shooting team and amazing three-point shooting defense of Northern Iowa. And I do think that Northern Iowa does get their tempo. I do think that they slow things down, are able to limit those three-point shots from Belmont and find a way to persevere. So my line at 4.5, I'm going to be willing to lay with Northern Iowa. I do like the under, especially with Northern Iowa outside the top 330 in terms of percentage of their missed shots. The resultant in offensive rebounds, so not a lot of second chances here. And on the under, and I'm willing to lay it with Northern Iowa, 697, 698. It is Virginia Tech. They're going to be playing with Stanford. And Samford finds themselves as an underdog of 5.5 to 7 points. So on this game, it is 144.5. Made a total of a 146.5. I like the over. You've got two teams that are relatively middle of the road in terms of their tempo. Stanford is about 169th in the country in total possessions per game. You've got a Virginia Tech team that they're more around about 59th in the country, but for Virginia Tech, a little bit of a warped number. That double overtime game against Virginia makes it look like they're getting many more possessions in a game than what they are. And for Virginia Tech, big key for this team has been just being able to survive without Toby Lawal, who to begin the season was averaging a double-double, 12.5 points, 10.5 rebounds per game, and they've been able to do so with Amani Hansberry stepping up in a big way. 16.5 points, 9 boards, 3 assists, only shoots about 32% from 3. Team as a whole is shooting about 35.5% from the outside, but this is also a Virginia Tech team that has been very good in terms of being able to limit opponents with their three-point shooting. Teams are shooting less than 28% from 3 against them. That's a top 35 mark in all of college basketball, and for Samford, I do think that they're going to be able to hold in there because they're not giving up a lot of second and third chances. And additionally, this has been a Samford three-point shooting unit that has been able to really travel. Samford shooting over 38% from three-point range on the road. That's a top 45 mark in all of college basketball, but second and third chances just not going to be there in this game. Samford is about 71st in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Teams are only pulling in there about 25.5% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. Meanwhile, it is a Virginia Tech unit that, without Lual, they've just been giving up a lot of second and third chances. They're now 225th in the country in terms of their defensive rebound percentage. They are allowing teams to be able to grab about 30% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound, and That actually goes up to 31.8% when they are at home. And for Stanford, I do think that having a star freshman in a guy that just really goes under the radar, in my opinion, Abuka Okore has been big. 22 points per contest, 3 assists. Oh, he shoots about 32% from three-point range, but he's really the engine that makes things run. Samford has also been a top 70 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Now, Virginia Tech, one thing that they have been able to do a masterful job of, they take care of the ball. About 10.5 turnovers per game, top 50 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and the Greek freshman in Nicolas Avadeus has been a big reason why. 14.5 points, 5 assists, shoots 35% from 3, and Jaden Schuett has been a really good sixth man for the team, now shooting about 42.5% from 3-point range. Has went a little bit colder recently, but still 9+ points in pretty much 7 out of the last 9 games, so I like what he's able to bring to the table. And when it comes down to it, I do think that Samford is going to be able to generate a few turnovers. I do think that Virginia Tech does do a nice job keeping things nice, crisp, and clean, but I think that the way that Samford is not going to be allowing a lot of second and third chances, with Virginia Tech still being a little bit shaky without Loyola in the fold, and Stanford just seems to be playing a little bit more slowly. That keeps Stanford in there. That said, I do think that the efficiency on both sides, especially with the 3-point shooting on both sides, is just enough to get you the over, and this will be close enough for late game filling. So I did set my total at a 146.5. I'm going to be in on this over, and for Samford 5+, I'm going to be willing to take those points. 699, 700 on the card. It is Temple. We give our O to Lane Kiffin go Owls. They play East Carolina. East Carolina's an underdog of 8.5 points. 146.5 is the total, and I did set Temple as a 7.5 point favorite, so here at A+, I'm going to be willing to take the points now. For East Carolina, I'm not even kidding when I say this, out of 365 Division I teams, they are 365th in the country in terms of points scored at a roadside-shoot-score venue. They do face a Temple team that is 320th in terms of total possessions per game. East Carolina is more of a mid-tempo team at 166th, but even with that, I do like the over, because in Temple games, they are really good in terms of taking care of the ball. This Temple team is a top 15 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and this is a defense that is just not getting the job done. Right now for Temple, 175th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They do a nice job in terms of shutting off the 3-point line, but for this East Carolina team, they're not looking to take a lot of threes. They're a bottom 30 team with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage. Their defense on the 3-point shooting percentage is a little bit better than it was last year. Last year, they were absolutely terrible. They're 305th this year, which is actually a little bit of improvement. Meanwhile, it's a Temple group that, in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage at home, that goes down to 30.6%, but they do leave themselves vulnerable on the inside, and I do think that that's how this East Carolina team is going to be able to hold in there. I did set my line at a 7.5. For East Carolina, they should be able to find a little bit inside. This has been a Temple team that has been outside the top 160 in terms of opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, and East Carolina does do a nice job in terms of generating some second and third chances. This is a top 125 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, with Giovanni Amaruju being the main guy. 4.6 offensive rebounds, 9.5 overall rebounds per game, 14 points per contest. Jordan Riley, Sachi suffered 20.5 points, 5.5 boards, 2 steals, only shoots about 30% from 3. And again, East Carolina, they're shooting 24.8% from 3. That is dead second last in all of college basketball. Are they a bad shooting team? And I mean a really bad shooting team? Yes, but I do actually expect a little bit of improvement here. East Carolina, they continue to turn the ball over, but again, you've got a Temple team that doesn't generate any turnovers whatsoever. And for the Temple group, you've got a team that shoots about 37.5% from 3-point range. That's a top 45 mark in all of college basketball. Darian Bill Fortuff, he's able to give you 17.5 points, shoots 36% from 3. You've got Aiden Tobiason shooting 40% from 3, 15 points per contest. Not a single guy on the roster that gives you over 5 rebounds per game, and I do think that those second and third chances are going to be able to help out East Carolina in terms of being able to find a way to be able to get some open looks, to be able to hold in this game. And this is a Temple team that's also really good at getting to the free throw line. Top 40 team in terms of free throw attempts on a per possession basis. This is a East Carolina team that they will put you on the free throw line quite a bit, because they're a little bit of a more physical team, as they're a top 200 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. So did set my total at a 149.5. I like the over, and at A+, won't take those points with East Carolina for the Pirates. 701, 702 on the card. Salle is going to be on the road against Rhode Island, and Rhode Island is a 10.5 point favorite. Total on this game, it is down to 133.5. I did set a total here of a 135.5. I like the over. Now LaSalle hovering around 300th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. The over 13.5 turnovers per game makes them a bottom 75 team in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and 326th in terms of total possessions per game. Rhode Island 316th in terms of total possessions per game, and I know that things have been a little bit less than savory here for Rhode Island recently, but I do think that they're going to be able to get a little bit more going offensively. Not quite enough to be able to cover this number. I set my line at 7.5 with Rhode Island. I love what Jonah Hinton has been able to bring this team. 15 points, pair of assists, shoots to the mid-30s from 3. Rhode Island is only shooting 30.4% from 3. That is outside the top 3 in all of college basketball, but they're doing a really good job in terms of generating turnovers. They are a top 30 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, you've got a LaSalle group that, again, they turn the ball over a ton, and they themselves are outside the top 290 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and they will allow you open looks from 3. LaSalle's allowing teams to shoot over 36% from 3, as well outside the top 3 in all of college basketball. A little bit more sturdy with their low post play. They have been in a road/neutral court setting, a top 175 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and Rhode Island has been really good with their interior defense at home. Overall, they're 56th in the country in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. You take a look at their home numbers and their home numbers only, that goes into the top 35 in all of college basketball, but they themselves have been having a little bit of an issue taking care of the ball. Rhode Island is about 285th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and with LaSalle shooting just 29.8% from 3. I think that there's a little bit of positivity doing here. If you got Jaden Marshall, who's able to give you 13 points, shoots in the mid-30s from 3, and Rob Dockery, along with Eric Acker, are pretty much the lone 2 guys on the roster that shoot above 33.3% from 3. They combine to shoot about 35.1% from 3. Between the two of them, about 15 points per contest. But Jerome Brewer has been dealing with a little bit of an injury, 10 points, 4 rebounds. That's been a little bit tough on this team, but he was able to return for conference play, so that gives them a little bit of a booster. You've been able to get good production of Josiah Harris, 8.5 points, 6 rebounds per game, and this is a LaSalle team that's a top 125 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Rhode Island has been pretty solid in terms of being able to give themselves second and third chances. Top 175 team in terms of rebound percentage, with Tyler Cochran doing a do-it-all sort of role with 12 points, 5 rebounds, 3 steals. I absolutely love his game. And for this Rhode Island bunch of your top 5 scores, all but one of them do generate at least 1 steal per contest. Keaton Idejiri is able to give you 5 rebounds. Mohamed So, 5.6 rebounds per game. But So has been dealing with an injury throughout much of the season, so that's been a bit of an issue, and he's going to be out once again in this game. But I do think that LaSalle starts to heat up a little bit more with regards to their 3-point shooting, and this is a Rhode Island team that has been a top 125 team in terms of both their own 2-point shooting percentage and opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. I think that this could be close enough for some late game fouling as well, so semi-total 135.5. I like the over at 8+, taking those points with LaSalle. 703, 704 on the card. It is VMI, and they're going to be on the road against East Tennessee. East Tennessee is a double-figure favorite. You're going to be laying with them 17.5 points on this game, 149.5. I did set my line at 16.5, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with VMI. VMI has really been struggling with their offense without Ricky Bradley. They're outside the top 240 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but they've had Mr. TJ Johnson do a nice job stepping up, 18.5 points, 7.5 boards. Shoots only about 32.5% from 3. VMI as a whole, they're outside the top 225 with their 3-point shooting percentage, despite the fact that they take a ton of shots from 3. They're a top 10 team in the nation in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 3-point range. And one thing that VMI is doing a relatively solid job of is taking care of the ball. With VMI, they're a top 150 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. And with East Tennessee, this has been a team that has been very good in terms of generating turnovers. They're a top 60 defense in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Not as beastly as they have been in past years in terms of their rebounding, but still doing a pretty rock solid job there. And East Tennessee is about a country average team at about 160th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. East Tennessee is also doing still a pretty solid job in terms of generating for themselves second and third chances. This team is grabbing about 29% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound, and VMI just does not give themselves second and third chances. 242nd in the country with this regard, but having Mario Tatum step up for this VMI team has been big. 10.5 points. He shoots 36% from 3. Linus Holstrom, mid-33 point shooter, about 10.5 points per contest. You really don't have too much supreme rebounding on this team, but AJ Clark, 6.5 points, 6.5 boards. That's been big for this group, and VMI, they continue to be well outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and neither of these teams is necessarily going to be looking to push a bunch of tempo. You've got a VMI team that's about 212th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. East Tennessee, once again, playing at a very slow, controlled pace. They're about 284th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and they had to replace much of that backcourt from a season ago, but these two guys in Cam Morris and Brian Taylor coming in as versatile gentlemen have been big, combined 28 points per contest, and both are shooting 37.5% from 3-point range. Blake Barkley has shot 45% from the outside, 12.5 points per game, and then really a nice glue guy for the team is Alan Strother. There's only 3 points per game, but 3.5 assists, 1.3 steals per contest. He's really the fulcrum of what this team is all about, and ETSU, I do think it's going to be able to get the job done and get that job done in rather convincing fashion. But again, them not being quite as dominant on the glass, I do think it's going to be hurting them. I do think that the turnovers is going to lead to an under. Semi-total 146.5. I like the under, and I'm going to be willing to take 17 plus with VMI 705, 706. It is the Citadel on the road against Mercer. Mercer is a 16.5 point favorite. 148.5 is the total. Set Mercer as a 19.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. This is a Citadel team that, man, it's not good to say the least. Now, the Citadel is doing one thing really well. They turn the ball over less than 10.5 times per contest. A top 55 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Still 300th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And Mercer, more of a country average team, 173rd in terms of points per possession, but they're averaging about 18 points more per 100 possessions at home rather than on the road. They go up to being a top 85 team in terms of points per possession when they are at home. Now, the bugaboo for this Mercer team has been allowing a lot of second and third chances, 321st in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage, about 34% of misses become an offensive rebound for opponents, but this is a Citadel team that they are outside the top 240 in terms of their offensive rebound percentage. So Adbasi giving you about 5.5 rebounds per game. He's the lone guy on the roster that gives you over 5 rebounds per game. And for the Citadel, 351st in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. I will say they are allowing about 5 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home, but they're playing at a really slow pace. They're outside the top 330 in terms of total possessions per game. And you've got a Mercer team that under Ryan Ritter, they're pushing a little bit more tempo, 147th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And I really like the versatility of Brody Shoulders. Shoulders won the main holdovers from a season ago, about 9.5 points, 7.5 boards, pair of assists per contest, and he's been able to give the team about 2 steals per game. Baraka Okoji, who comes over from George Mason, 5.3 assists, 17.5 points per game. Mercer, not a great three-point shooting team at 32.5% from the outside, but top 125 team in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, and they have been a top 95 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per-possession basis. For the Citadel, again, they do a solid job in terms of taking care of the ball, so they make the most out of their possessions, but other than that, they're not really doing a ton. Braxton Williams and Christian Moore do combine to shoot about 36.5% from 3 between the two of them, 22.5 points per contest. Nobody else on the team gives you double figures. You've had just a lot of rough low post play with regards to defense. They're outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They themselves just have not been able to shoot it well at the free throw line, the 3-point line, the 2-point line, and this is a team that they are in the top 50 in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 3-point range, and I don't think that they're going to find good looks against Mercer. So I did set a total here of a 143.5. I like the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 19 with Mercer. 707, 708 on the card. Fort Wayne is going to be on the road against the Youngstown St. The Penguins are a 5.5 point favorite. Total on this game 145 to 145.5. And with those Youngstown St. Penguins, I'm going to be willing to lay it. I set them as a 6 point favorite. Youngstown St, very rock solid defense, and you've got a team that's relatively mid tempo. They're clocking in 201st in terms of total possessions per game. Fort Wayne is about 152nd as well. And the name of the game for this Fort Wayne team is being able to win the turnover battle. They're a top 60 team in both turnovers forced on a per possession basis and fewest turnovers on a per possession basis with regards to their offense. Meanwhile, you've got a Youngstown St team that also has been good at taking away the ball. They're 82nd in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Now, they do leave a little bit of something to be desired with regards to taking care of the ball, but they are a top 175 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and the big key for this Youngstown State team is being able to hold up with regards to their 3-point shooting defense, as they have been a little bit more suspect with that regard, and this is a Fort Wayne team that's going to be looking to take a lot of shots from 3 because they have to make up for the fact that they are well outside the top 275 in terms of rebound percentage. With this Fort Wayne team, you don't have a single guy in the roster that gives you over 5 rebounds per game. Their leading rebounder is Sirius Duffy with about 5.5 points, 4.7 rebounds per game. Corey Adnott, though, 20.5 points, 4.5 boards. He shoots 36.5% from 3. This Fort Wayne team as a whole, they shoot about 33.5% from 3, hovering right around about 200th in all of college basketball, but outside the top 340 in terms of percentage of their missed shots, that result in an offensive rebound. And for this Fort Wayne team, they're going to give it up from 3-point range. They are allowing teams to shoot about 36% from 3. That's clocking in right around about 300th in all of college basketball. And they're also very vulnerable on the inside, 283rd in the country in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and that gets way worse when they're away from home. Away from home, that is well outside the top 300, and that's where I do think that Youngstown State is going to be able to win out, as you've got Chris Carroll caroling all the way to being the top scorer, 17.5 points, about 5 boards, and he shoots 46.5% from 3. Youngstown State, country average team, shooting 34.7% from 3-point, and they push everything inside. Youngstown State is forcing opponents to take over 67% of their field goal attempts from inside the 3-point line. That's a top 125 mark in all of college basketball. This is one of the better shot blocking teams of the country, with Emmanuel Zugulov coming over from overseas, blocking at per contest, 6.5 points. He's sort of that Gabe Dines replacement from season ago, and does shoot actually 37.5% from 3. Rich Rolfe shoots 39% from 3, 10 points per contest. Now you've got some nice supporting guards out there for this Purdue Fort Wayne team, as Mikal Stevenson comes over from Grambling, 14.5 points, 3.5 assists per contest. DeAndre 3000 Craig, 15 points per game, and Craig shoots 38.5% from 3. But in the end, I do think that Youngstown State going to be able to do a nice job of being able to win the rebound battle, win this game from within, and not allow Fort Wayne those clean looks from 3-point range. And even though this Youngstown State team has turned the ball over quite a bit outside the top 270 in terms of ball security, I think that they get it done. Set my line at 6. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Youngstown State and set a total of 146. So you're at the 145, 145.5 like the over. 709, 710 on the card. It is Creighton, and they're going to be on the road against Villanova. Villanova is a 6.5 point favorite. Total on this game 139.5. And for Villanova, I made them a 3.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points. Now Creighton has been rough with their offense when they've been away from home. Overall, they're about 99th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but in a road or neutral court venue, this goes outside the top 215 in all of college basketball. That said, this Villanova team is allowing teams to shoot 40.9% from 3-point range at home. That is 344th in all of college basketball. Overall, they're 269th with this regard, and for Villanova, they are going to have the best rebounder in this game. That would be Duke Brandon, and he has been absolutely incredible for this team. Comes over from Grand Canyon, and right now he is supplying 12 points, 11.3 rebounds per game, but even with that, this has been a Villanova team that's still been well outside the top 100 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They are a solid team in terms of generating turnovers, a top 130 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. That said, this has been a Creighton team that's been able to do a solid job in terms of taking care of the ball in Creighton. They're outside the top 275 in terms of generating turnovers, so it's going to be sort of a make it or take it sort of game, and I think a little bit of a lower tempo game as well, especially with Villanova being 317th of the country in terms of total possessions per game. Creighton has slowed themselves down to 235th. Does feel like they're starting to speed up a little bit more. Bryce Lindsey has been the main man for Villanova with 44.7% 3-point shooting, 17 points per contest, and then Arcaden Lewis has come in. He's been able to supply the team with about 12 points per contest, but I do think that Creighton is going to be able to hold in there, even with Owen Freeman giving you only about 5 rebounds per game. He's been a bit of a disappointment, but his former Iowa teammate and Josh Dix has done a nice job stepping up with 12 points per game, and all of a sudden, Austin Schwartz, who was a bit of a disappointment when he was over at Miami, first few games of the season, he put up a big giant nothing burger for this team. He has really been able to elevate this team. If you take a look ever since the Nebraska game, we had 16 points. So if you're looking at things that is the past 7 games, he's been averaging in that neighborhood about 17.5 points per game. He's shooting 44% from 3 on 9 threes per game. He's really elevating this Creighton team, and I like what I'm seeing out of him. This is a Creighton team that also keeps you off the free throw line, number 3 in all of college basketball in terms of percentage of opponents' possessions that end in a free throw. They're also a top 75 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. I think that that's enough for them to hold lively, and I do think that this is going to be a game that involves some late game fouling. And for Villanova, this year in and year out has been one of the better free throw shooting teams in all of college basketball, down below 70% this year. So I'm out line at 3.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Creighton. I did set a total of a 139.5. If we could get to a 139 or less, in on the over, 140 or higher, the under, but taking those points with Creighton. 7-11, 7-12 on the card. It is Rice. We give our O'Delay and Kiffin go. I will say are going to be on the road against Wichita State. Wichita State is a favorite here of between 13.5 to 14.5 points. So on this game, it is 141.5 to 142.5, and with Wichita State, made them a 12-point favorite. I'm going to be one to take the points with Rice. Now Rice is generating absolutely nothing on offense when they're away from home. Right now for this Rice team, they are 320th in terms of points per possession in a road/neutral court venue. It has been a team that's fallen outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis as well, and they're going to be slowed down in this game. Wichita State 282nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but I think that Trey Bordeaux and Nick Anderson do just enough for this team to be able to hold in the game, as these two guys have been able to combine for 27.7 points per contest. Anderson shoots 39% from 3-point range. Bordeaux has been able to give you about 2.5 assists per game. Jalen Smith is shooting 41% from 3. He's supplying about 11.5 points per contest. It's a Rice team that has been very solid in terms of giving themselves second and third chances. Problem is, Wichita State has been all the better with regards to offensive rebound percentages. Right now for Wichita State, they rank 7th in the country in terms of offensive rebound percentage. They grab 39.9% of their misses as an offensive board, but for this Rice team, they grab about 30.5% of their misses as a rebound. That is a top 150 mark in all of college basketball. Main guy that has been able to help out with that has been Jimmy Odekun, as he's been able to give the team about 2.6 offensive rebounds and 5 total rebounds per game, only about 5 points per contest. Andrew Akuchi down low has been able to give you about 4 rebounds per game. Stephen Gua doesn't give you any scoring, but he gives you about 4.5 rebounds per game. And I do think that Rice is going to be looking to embrace their interior game, especially with them being outside the top 240 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Rice, they themselves are actually outside the top 340 with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage, but I do think that they hold in there. You've got a Wichita State team that is not going to generate any sort of turnovers. They're outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Big for a Rice team that's turning the ball over 12.5 times per game. Now, Keenan Giles has been great for Wichita State, 18 points per game on 43% 3-point shooting. Karen Boyd comes over from ETSU, 11.5 points, 6 boards. He shoots 40% from 3, and Wichita State has went from being outside the top 300 in terms of 3-point shooting percentage last year to being in the top 60 this season. And certainly when you got the Berg and Wilberg down low, has been able to give you 8.5 boards, 9 points per game as a true 7-footer. That does put a little bit of wrench into Rice, but I do think that the lack of turnovers that Wichita State is able to generate does help this Rice team be able to set up some good clean offense and hold in there what I think is going to be a slog. So if I total 138, I like the under, and I'm willing to take anything above 12 here with Rice. Go Owls. 7-13, 7-14 on the card. Florida Atlantic is going to be on the road against UAB, and the Blazers of UAB are a favorite here. You're going to be laying with them 3 to 3.5 points. 159.5 is the total, and I did set my line at 5. I'm going to be willing to lay it with UAB. Recognize that UAB is just absolutely awful in terms of their 3-point shooting percentage outside the top 340 in all of college basketball. That said, it's a UAB team that has done a nice job in terms of grabbing offensive rebounds, top 100 team in terms of percentage of their misses that result in an offensive rebound, and they certainly do make the most out of their possessions. Right now for UAB, they are number 1 in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and even though this team is just absolutely ghastly with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage, it's not like they're taking a lot of threes. This UAB team is only taking 29.6% of their shots from 3-point range. That is the 11th lowest mark in all of college basketball, and you've got a Florida Atlantic team that is going to be looking to go bombs away from 3-point range, as they are attempting about 42% of their shots from 3-point range. That is a top 130 mark in all of college basketball, and now they have to go up against a UAB team that has been about country average with regards to guarding the 3-point line. 199th, opponents are shooting just a hair below 34% from 3-point range. Now UAB is looking to gun it there. 65th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. You've got a Florida Atlantic team that's been really pushing tempo a little bit more recently as well. 123rd in terms of total possessions per game after they got off to a little bit of a slower start to the season. And while Florida Atlantic is a team that's content to bomb it from 3, and they're a top 100 team with their 3-point shooting percentage at 35.7%, they themselves are once again doing a rough job in terms of being able to guard the 3-point line. Last year, Florida Atlantic well outside the top 300, down to about 270th this year, so they've seen a little bit of improvement, but hard to trust in Cannon and Carlisle for the team. 14 points, 4 boards, shoots 32% from 3, can easily shoot you in or out of a game. Devin Vanderpool, though, has been solid. 16.5 points, 6.5 boards, 2.5 assists, a little bit of stat sheet suffer, and then you've had a trio of guys in Isaiah Elohim, hopefully I said that correct, Devin Williams, Alexander Pendleton, who have all been able to shoot at least 40% from 3. Williams generates 2.7 blocks per contest as well down low, so good versatility there. And then with Eliam along with Pendleton, they combine for about 8 rebounds per game, as Florida Atlantic is also doing a really good job in terms of generating second and third chances for themselves. This team, they grab about 13.5 offensive rebounds per game. If you look at them in terms of percentage of their missed shots, they result in an offensive rebound, 88th in the country, but in a road/neutral court venue, that actually accelerates up to the top 40 in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, for UAB, again, not a lot of 3-point shooting with this team, but you've got Chance Westry, who's done a nice job, oftentimes coming off the bench, give the team about 15.5 points, 4.5 assists per game, and additionally, you've been able to get some good production out of Jacob Meyer. He dealt with a little bit of injury, has been able to supply the team with about 14 points per contest. Should be good to go in this one. He was a big part of that double overtime win against South Florida, and additionally, you've got a guy that's been able to give you about 8.5 boards, and Evan Chapman, who's giving you about 8.5 points per game. Kyron Lindsey, Daniel Rivera, they do a nice job down low, and I do think that UAB is going to do a solid job on the glass with UAB. They've been pretty good in terms of the interior defense as well, top 115 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and I do think that them taking care of the ball allows them to win this game, and I did set a total here of a 157. Obviously, UAB is having a little bit of a rough go of it, popping it from 3-point range, but both of these teams have their possessions per game numbers elevated by the fact that they have played a lot of overtime, so I'm going to be in on that under, and I'm going to be willing to take a shot here on UAB, made them the 5-point favorite. 7-15, 7-16 on the card. Southern Illinois is going to be on the road against Illinois Chicago. UIC is a home underdog here of 2.5 to 3.5 points. 147.5 to 148.5 is the total. So Southern Illinois is a 3.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 3 with them. Southern Illinois in year number 2 under Scott Nagy is really starting to crank up their tempo as expected. 56th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And for Illinois Chicago, this is a very mid-tempo team. Right now, they're about 208th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And for this Illinois Chicago team. They're really good in terms of giving themselves second and third chances, and they're really bad at preventing second and third chances as well. Illinois Chicago right now, 353rd in all of college basketball in terms of percentage of opponents' missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. At home, they allow opponents to grab over 34% of their misses as an offensive rebound, but they are also 31st in the country in terms of their own offensive rebound percentage. So lots of second and third chances to be had here. Southern Illinois, more around about 125th in terms of offensive rebound percentage, but you put them in a road/neutral-court venue. That's a top 75 mark in all of college basketball, and Southern Illinois is going to be very content to pile drive the ball down, though. This has been one of the worst three-point shooting teams in all of college basketball, and they know this, and that's a big reason why they are doing a nice job pile driving the ball down, though. 73.6% of field goal attempts for Southern Illinois are coming from two-point range. That is the second highest mark in all of college basketball. You've got LGB squared, who have really been the headliners for this team. Rollins and Prince LGB are combining for about 18 points per contest. These two guys have been able to combine for about 12.5 rebounds per game as well, and then Kuron House is your lone double-figure scorer, 14.5 points, 3 assists. He shoots 32% for three, which is good for this team. They shoot 28.8% for three. That's a bottom 20 mark in all of college basketball. And also, for Southern Illinois, you have to take note of this. They are bad at the free throw line, 66.2% free throw shooting team. So it could come into effect if this is a little bit of a nip and tuck game, but this is an Illinois-Chicago team that they themselves are leaving something to be desired with regards to just executing inside. They're outside the top 240 in terms of two-point and three-point shooting percentage. Now, Illinois-Chicago, top 125 team in terms of getting to the free throw line. They do shoot 76% at the free throw line. That said, this is also a squad that has been outside the top 150 in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, while outside the top 225 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Ahmad Henderson, 13.5 points. He only shoots about 26.5% from three, but his number one ancillary scorer, Andy Johnson, 13 points. He shoots 35% from three-point range with Illinois Chicago. They're also having a tough time taking care of the ball outside the top 250 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, but with their defense, they've actually been able to do a nice job in terms of being able to generate some turnovers, while Southern Illinois, more of a country average team. They're about 137th in terms of turnovers for us on a per possession basis, while Illinois Chicago is 63rd in terms of generating those turnovers. So very interesting spot here. I do think that you get a game that's close enough for late game felling, and even though Southern Illinois has been a little bit shaky at the free throw line, I think that they do just enough to be able to find a way to get the job done. I did set my line at 3.5. I'm willing to lay up to 3 with Southern Illinois. Like the over as well, set my total at 149.5. 7-17, 7-18 on the card. Charlotte is going to be on the road against UTSA. Meet the Roadrunners are an underdog of 3.5 points on this game. It is 143.5, and with Charlotte, I made them a 6.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. And the meep is more like sad, because for UTSA, they are 68th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but this is a team that's supposed to be really good at generating turnovers. Austin Klonch's teams typically are 285th in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. This team is really allowing it on the inside. They're outside the top 250 with regards to opponents' two-point shooting and three-point shooting percentage, and this team is 353rd with their own three-point shooting percentage. Right now, you've got one guy in Jameer Simpson who's been able to give you double figures, and Jameer Simpson has been great for this team. He's been a Sachi sufferer who's been able to supply 17.5 points, 4.5 boards, pair of assists, shoots 36.5% from three-point range. Only guy on the roster other than Mo Njai, who has made, I believe, 2 threes this year, that is currently shooting above 30% from three-point range. Just not good, to say the least. And then they're outside the top 300 with their two-point shooting percentage. This team has been able to give themselves some second and third chances, top 150 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, but they're allowing teams to grab 13.5 offensive rebounds themselves, so that's been a big giant issue for this team. They're not taking care of the ball. They're outside the top 225 in terms of ball security, and for the Charlotte group, they are one that has been a little bit shaky with regards to their defense, who are in 55th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but far better than this UTSA team. And for Charlotte, they're now shooting it much better from three-point range this season, shooting 35% from three. Anton Boinke, who comes over from Providence as a true 7-footer, 11.5 points, 9 rebounds, 2 blocks. He shoots 44% from three. Ben Bradford, their top scorer with 13 points per game, he has only shot 13% from three-point range, but the ancillary guys like an Arden Coyers has been able to shoot about 44% from three, 7.5 points per contest. Zane Mingo, who comes over from Marshall, 10 points, 4.5 assists. He shoots 37% from three-point range, and for Charlotte, they're doing a very solid job on the glass. They've been a top 100 team in terms of their overall rebound percentage. They're doing a nice job in terms of giving themselves some second and third chances as well. If you look at percentage of missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, this team is a top 100 team, and shooting 35.7% from three-point range, that's a top 100 mark in all of college basketball. I do think that wins out and is going to allow them to be able to get the job done against a UTSA team that's been all sorts of rough this season. I did set my total at 144.5. We've got a Charlotte team team outside the top 340 in terms of total possessions per game, but I think that the inefficiency of the UTSA defense allows them to get the over. So in on the over, and I'm willing to lay it with Charlotte, set them as 6.5-point favorite. 719, 720 on the card. Iowa State is on the road against Baylor, and Baylor is a home underdog of 5.5 points. 157.5 is the total, and talked about this game with our good friend Rob Donaldson, and I'm in on Iowa State. I did set them as a 7-point favorite. Again, I think that the D-League guys in general are being very overvalued right now. Is there a chance that we're going to be able to see a little bit more of James Njai? Sure, he's a true 7-footer who was the 31st pick of the overall draft like 3 years ago, but he had 5 points and 4 rebounds in that game against CCU, a game where Baylor had one of the worst offensive showings all season long, and this has been a Baylor team that's been very good in terms of giving themselves second and third chances, top 30 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but they weren't able to get a lot going in that game. And this is an Iowa State team that's just so rock solid with their defense. You're not going to be able to find any holes whatsoever in it, as Joshua Jefferson has been that main guy. 16 plus points, 5 plus assists, multiple steals per contest. Iowa State right now number 2 in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And this Baylor team is right now 125th, albeit they are allowing about 16.5 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than in a roadside shoot-score venue. And Cameron Carr has been great, shooting 39.5% from 3, 21 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. Tonde Yusufu, he does it all, 2.5 steals, 18.5 points, 6 boards, only shooting about 31% from 3-point range, but Baylor as a whole shoots 37% from 3, but just a lack of depth for this team. I still go back to that game that they played against Arlington Baptist, a D2 team in which they blew out by over 60 points. They only had one guy off the bench play more than 13 minutes. That was before they got Njai, so depth is an issue. And then for Iowa State, you've got plenty of guys. They're able to fire on all cylinders. When you need Nate Heise, he's going to be there for you. Again, with Milan Mimosilovic, 18.5 points, shooting 56.5% from 3. That should be going downward a little bit. Iowa State as a whole, they shoot 41.9% from 3. That's a top 10 mark in all of college basketball. And this has been a Baylor defense that, again, they've been very, very suspect with regards to that defense. They're outside the top 170 with regards to opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, so should be open looks for Iowa State, and Iowa State continues to be a top 5 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, with Tamon Lipsby being the head of the snake, 6 assists, 14 points, 2.5 steals, only shoots about 30% from 3, but Jamarian Bateman, he's been able to shoot 45% from 3-point range. He helps out with that regard. I think that Iowa State finds a way to be able to get the job done, and it is an Iowa State team that's playing a little bit faster than they have in the past. Baylor is about 75th in terms of total possessions per game. Iowa State is 168th, but I think that the Iowa State defense wins out here to be able to get you that under. So with the total, I set mine at a 157 right now, seeing out there a 157.5. I like the under, and I'm willing to lay with Iowa State, 721, 722. It is the men of Troy on the road against Arkansas State. Arkansas State is a 2.5 to a 3.5 point favorite. Total on this game, 157.5 to 158.5, and did set my line at 2.5, so 3 plus. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Troy, and I do like this total over. You've got a Troy team that's been playing at warp speed this season. I recognize that their numbers are a little bit, shall we say, heightened by the fact that they had that double overtime game against San Diego State, triple overtime against USC, but 20th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and you've got an Arkansas State team that you know that these guys are going to look to gun. They are 52nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Now, the bugaboo for Arkansas State, ball security. They are outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and I do think that that's going to be very costly in this case. Now, in a nip and tuck game, Arkansas State, top 15 team with their free throw shooting percentage at over 78%, but for Troy, the Campbell brothers have been great. Cooper Campbell, 14 points. He's able to shoot 42% from 3. Kobe Campbell, 41% 3-point shooter, 9.5 points per contest. These guys have been amazing, and then Victor Valdez has been able to just be a matrix, fill up every column of the stat sheet, 16.5 points, 4 boards, 4 assists, 1.7 steals per contest. Thomas Stout, he's able to give you 10.5 rebounds per game for a Troy team that I think is going to be able to do a good job down low. They're able to grab quite a few second and third chances for themselves. They're going to give up quite a few second and third chances as well. Troy overall is about 178th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and Arkansas State more in that neighborhood, about 211th. But I mean, right now, what is really ailing Arkansas State is that you thought that this was going to be a better 3-point shooting team. Right now, for Arkansas State, they're shooting from 3-point range a nice hearty 30.5%. That goes down to 29.6% at home. That is about 294th in all of college basketball, and it's really a whole is greater than some of its parts sort of effort for Arkansas State. They have yet to find that go-to scorer. Kyle Heyman has been able to give you 11.5 points per contest, and Joey Chimena, who missed like 11 games, he's been able to give you 14 points per contest in the 4 games that he's actually played, but I don't think he's going to be that top scorer when it's all said and done. Then you've got Chandler Jackson, Christian Harmon, Jackson Ellingsworth. I'll give you between about 10 to 11 points per contest, and Arkansas State, top 100 team in terms of percentage of the missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, good on the glass, good at being able to hit those free throws, but they are outside the top 260 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, so vulnerable there. And with those turnovers, I do think that Troy is going to be a hold in there in a game that I think is going to be very much up and down. Somebody told 162.5, like the over, and I'm willing to take 3 plus here with Troy. 723, 724, it is Murray Murray State on the road against Evansville, and the Purple Aces, which have been more like the Brown Deuces with the way that they have laid a deuce on offense. They are a home underdog here of anywhere between 8 to 8.5 points. 156.5 to 157.5 is the total, and I'm holding back Murray State. I set them as a 9.5 point favorite. It's a Murray State team that's very much content to push tempo, 49th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and then with Evansville, they are not pushing tempo. They're 252nd in terms of total possessions per game, and Evansville is just not doing a good job with regards to their backcourt. They are shooting 28.9% from three-point range overall. That goes down to 27.6% at home, and this is a Murray State team that they are right now shooting 37.5% from three. That's a top 35 mark in all of college basketball. Mason Miller has been able to shoot darn near 50% from three-point range. He really doesn't do a lot other than pop it from three, 8.5 points, 4 rebounds per game, but he's a good one-trick pony. And then Javon Jackson, 2.5 assists, 16.5 points per contest. He shoots 45% from three-point range. It's a Murray State team that's also been very much encouraging teams to go inside. They are actually number one in the country in terms of percentage of opponents' shots that come from two-point range, and that's allowed Murray State to become a top 150 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, for the Evansville team, while they're not great on offense, they're also not great on defense. They're 44th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and for Murray State, this is not necessarily a team that's going to push the issue, generate a lot of turnovers, and this has been an Evansville team that's been outside the top 250 with regards to ball security, but with them forcing so much inside, it's big that they're a top 65 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage as well. So that really takes away a lot of options for an Evansville team that has had Joshua Hughes do a nice job at about 6'6", 6'7", give the team some versatility as he's right now supplying about 8.5 points, 5 rebounds from three-point range. He shoots 38.5% from three-point range. He is the only other top 6 scorers that shoots about 30.6% from three. Connor Turnbull, good versatility, 12.5 points, 6 boards, 2.5 blocks per contest. He shoots 23.5% from three. AJ Casey, 28% three-point shooter, 9.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. I've not been able to get it done there. Now, Evansville, a top 225 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but even with their two-point shooting percentage, that being outside the top 280 in all of college basketball, Murray State pushing everything inside, I think that that's going to be costly to an over. I did set my total at 155.5. I'm in on the under, and with Murray State, I'm going to be willing to lay up to 9 with them. 725, 726 on the card. Illinois State is on the road against Valparaiso. Valparaiso is a home underdog of 6.5 points on this game. It is 137.5, and with Illinois State, I did set them as a favorite here, 5.5 points. So at 6+, I'm going to be willing to take those points with Valparaiso. Now, I recognize that this is a Valparaiso group that's not shooting it well, really from anywhere. They're outside the top 275 in terms of both their two-point and three-point shooting percentage, but they're really good with their interior defense. They're a top 112 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, but at home that elevates into the top 75. And Valparaiso is at the very least making the most out of their just possessions, as this team is 83rd in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. You've got an Illinois State team that's doing a good job of taking care of the ball themselves. They are 99th in the country with this regard, and for Illinois State was a little bit of a chilly three-point shooting start to the season, but now you've had these guys being able to pick it up as you've got one of your main returners in Johnny Kinzinger give you 12 points per contest, only shooting about 34.5% for three. After that was more like 40% last season. But here's the big issue that you've got for Illinois State in terms of laying this number. They are terrible at the free throw line. 66.8% at the free throw line. That is a bottom 45 mark in all of college basketball. Now, opponents shoot 64.8% at the free throw line against them, so that indicates that they've been getting very lucky. Now, I will say this has been an Illinois State team that after last year they were not so great on defense. They've really been able to do a better job with that regard. If you look at points allowed on a per possession basis, this Illinois State team, they're checking in number 30 in all of college basketball, but they are also giving up about 24.5 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than away from home. And with Valparaiso, I do think that they're going to be able to hold up down low with sort of the whole is greater than some of its parts approach. They do have to match up with Chase Walker, give you 13.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, and then the ancillary guys for Illinois State have been really good with their three-point shooting. Tariq Coleman, Bowden Skunberg, and Ty Pence are all shooting at least 43% from three-point. That trio has been able to combine for about 34 points per contest, and for Valparaiso, you've been able to have three guys give you double figures in Owen Dees, Rakeem Chaney, and JT Pettigrew. Pettigrew, he's going to give you about 6 rebounds per game, more of a low post presence. Chaney has been their main facilitator, 3 assists per contest, shoots 37% from 3. Dees shoots 40% for 3 as a 6'6", a little bit of a do-it-all guy, but having Sham Tupula give you about 6.5 rebounds per game has been big. You've had mixing and matching, and Isaiah Barnes just has not been necessarily what this team expected. Starter at Tulsa last few seasons, guy that was over at Michigan as well. He's only been able to supply about 5.5 points per game, so that's the reason why they've been a little bit rough with that regard. But still, this is a team that's doing a really nice job in terms of being able to grab for themselves second and third chances, and I do think that that's going to be enough for them to be able to hold in this game. For Valparaiso, they are, in terms of percentage of missed shots, they result in an offensive rebound, top 125 team. with that regard. I do think that this game is going to be close enough for late game following. Big reason why, like the over sub, I total at 139.5, and for Illinois State, could only set them as 5.5 point favorite. So here at 6+, won't take those points with Valpo. 727, 728 on the card. It is South Florida. They are going to be on the road against North Texas. North Texas, a home underdog of 4.5 points. 144.5 is the total. I'm going to be in on the under. I set my total at 143.5. Going to have a massive tempo war here. You've got a North Texas team that is 333rd in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. South Florida, they're currently checking in numero uno. Now, part of that is because their last game went to multiple overtimes against UAB, so it does need to be factored in. But for both of these teams, they have went in completely opposite directions with regards to their offense. And this is a South Florida team that does a great job in terms of giving themselves second and third chances. 40th in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Part of that has been Isaiah Nelson coming on over along with Brian Hodgson from Arkansas State, and he has been their main rebounder, about 16 points, 9.9 rebounds per contest. 4 of them on the offensive glass. Josh Omajafu, he's done a nice job in terms of stuff in the stat sheet. 14 points, 5 boards, only shoots about 28.5% from 3. And South Florida, a little bit rough with regards to that exterior play. They're outside the top 275 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage at 35.5%, and they themselves shoot only about 32.7% from 3. That is outside the top 220 in all of college basketball, but they're a top 15 team in terms of free throw attempts on a per possession basis, and they should be able to hold up against a North Texas team that just has been really shaky with their offense. They're outside the top 220 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but I will also say this for this struggling North Texas offense. For one, much of it has been due to the fact that they do lose the UCLA transfer Will McClendon for the year, who was averaging about 13 points per contest, and they've been adapting game by game without him. And for 2, North Texas has a massive home and road splits. Right now for North Texas, 292nd in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but they are averaging darn near 25 points more per 100 possessions at home rather than in a road/court setting. And you've been able to get some good production out of Jashawn Stevens, who's been supplying now about 16.5 points, 3.5 boards, pair of steals per contest. Well, he shoots about 30% from 3-point range, but you've been able to get quite a few second and third chances themselves. Dylan Arnett has been able to give you 7.5 points, 6 rebounds per game. North Texas is doing a pretty solid job, not allowing good looks from 3-point range as well. They've been a top 30 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Teams are shooting less than 28.5% from 3-point range against them, and it is a South Florida team that is not afraid to go bombs away from 3-point range. You've had Joseph Pignon be able to give you 14+ points per contest. He does shoot in the high 30s from 3-point range. And if you look at just percentage of shots that come from 3-point range, this is a South Florida team that right now they are taking about 43.5% of their shots from 3. That's the top 100 mark in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, you've got North Texas team a little bit more content to pile drive the ball down low. And with this being a South Florida team that does do a great job in terms of generating turnovers, right now they're a top 75 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. I do think that does just enough to be able to keep this total under, but that said, with this North Texas team, even though the defense has been rock solid, with South Florida being able to generate those second and third chances and them having a advantage on the glass, in my opinion, I do think that South Florida finds a way to get the job done. I set South Florida as a 7.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number in. Me my total at 143.5, so I also like this total under. 729, 730 on the card. Washington is on the road against Purdue. Purdue is a 15.5 to a 17 point favorite. Your total is 151.5 to 152.5, and with this Purdue bunch, made them an 18.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. The Wesley Yates injury looms very, very large for a Washington team that just has not found it from 3-point range, about 253rd in the country with their own 3-point shooting percentage. And for Washington, they were really relying upon him because he was flying about 15 points per game, and he was shooting 34% from 3. Well, the team as a whole shoots 31.9% from the outside. Now, Hannes Steinbeck has been amazing. 18.5 points, 11.8 boards, pair of assists per contest. He shoots 40% from 3, and Desmond Claude began the season banged up. He's now up to about 15 points per game. They need him to take ownership of the backcourt, and he's been able to do so with 18+ points in 3 of the last 4 games, so he's been able to elevate a little bit more there, but it does feel like this Washington team is starting to slow down a little bit more in terms of total possessions per game overall for the campaign. They do rank about 103rd in all of college basketball, but with having Yates out of the fold, they've been slowing down by about 3.5 possessions per game fewer without him. And Purdue, this is a pretty slow and controlled team, 286th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and it's a Purdue team that has been really good with their offense. How about 8th in the country with regards to 3-point shooting percentage? Number 1 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but it's more than just the offense with Purdue. This defense has really been able to step up. They're a top 15 team with regards to rebound percentage, with Trey Kaufman-Renn averaging darn near a double-double, and then you haven't had Oscar Clough quite be able to give you a double-double, but I mean, he's come over from South Dakota State, and he's been rock solid. 11.5 points, 8.5 rebounds per game. Kaufman-Renn, 14 points, 9.8 rebounds per game, and then Fletcher Lawyer, Kaufman-Renn, Braden Smith, Smith. They all shoot at least 38.9% from three. Smith is not necessarily the scorer that a lot of people expected, 12.5 points per contest, but 9.6 assists and 2.9 turnovers per game. One thing that Purdue won't do is really force the issue in terms of generating turnovers. They've been outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, so Washington going to be able to keep it relatively clean there, but I do think that with Purdue being a top 50 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, that's really going to hurt a Washington team that has been looking a little bit more to the outside. And to the credit of Washington, top 100 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that resulted in an offensive rebound, fronting Kepadog, 7 boards, 2.5 blocks, 5.5 points per game, but I do think that with the injury to Wesley Yates, this is going to be a team that continues to slow down, and for this Washington team, I do think that it's going to be very interesting to see what they do moving forward, as they have given up now 70 points or fewer in 3 of their last 4 games, but I do think that Purdue is going to be efficient, and they're going to be slow. I did set my total at 144.5. I like the under, and with Purdue, I'm willing to lay up to 18 with them. 731, 732 on the card. Arizona State is on the road against BYU, and BYU, pretty sizable favorites here. You're going to be laying 17.5 to 18.5 with them. Totals between 166.5 to 167.5. I like Arizona State here. I did set them as a underdog of 13.5 points. Arizona State is shooting 39.7% from three-point range away from home. That's a top 45 mark in all of college basketball. Arizona State is very much going to leave something to be desired down low, and they have been outside the top 140 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but Mo Odom is one of the most underrated guards in the country. 16.5 points, 6.5 assists, 1.5 steals per contest, shoots 35.5% from three-point range. Masamba Diop down low, he's been the replacement to Jaden Quantitz, and he's been solid. 13.5 points, pair of blocks, 5 rebounds per game. Now, Arizona State not giving themselves any sort of second and third chances. They're outside the top 250 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, outside the top 200 in terms of overall rebound percentage, but this has been a unit that has been able to do a nice job in terms of generating turnovers, top 100 team, in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Big thanks to that has been Anthony Johnson being able to give you 14 points, 1.2 steals, shoots in the mid-30s from three-point range, and for BYU, it's actually been the defense that's been more efficient than the offense. BYU 28th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. In terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, that's 18th. And both of these teams are fast, but not necessarily warp speed fast. You've got an Arizona State team that's right now 98th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. BYU more on about 107th. And AJ Devansa, he has been really taking things over. 23 points, 7 boards, 3.8 assists, shoots in the mid-30s from 3. Robert Wright has been Mr. Wright, as he and Dawson Baker both shoot 47.3% from three-point range. Now, Baker right now dealing with injury. That's been an issue. He's been out really since the beginning of the month of December, but having Wright out there, being able to supply about 5.5 assists per contest, he's been able to do a nice job helping out with that. And Richie Saunders, 18 points per game, shooting 39% for 3. That's been rock solid as well against an Arizona State team that has been outside the top 150 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage defense. And this is a BYU team that they keep you off the free throw line. Top 20 team in terms of fewest free throws allowed on a per possession basis, and they've been able to get great play down low out of Kebakita, who's been able to give you 7 points, 8.1 rebounds per game, but this has also been a BYU team that has been, shall we say, not necessarily as fast as a lot of people expected. I do think that Arizona State, with that three-point shooting, I do think that that's going to be just enough for them to remain lively, even though BYU obviously has a great home court advantage. I did set my line at 13.5. Won't take those points with Arizona State, made by a total of 163.5. I like the under. 733, 734 on the card. Davidson is going to be on the road against Loyola Chicago. Loyola Chicago is a home underdog of 1.5 to 2.5 points. 136.5 to 137.5 is the total. I sit Davidson as a 7.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay. Loyola Chicago has looked a little bit better in the last few games. I think a little bit more of that is incompetence from the teams that they were playing. Dayton has been absolutely awful at guarding the three-point line. Rhode Island just has not been good under Archie Miller. I will say the Santa Clara game was pretty impressive, but this is still a Loyola Chicago team that's well outside the top 200 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. This unit is generating no turnovers whatsoever. 8.2 turnovers per game is dead last in all of college basketball, and this team is getting pounded on the boards outside the top 230 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, even though you got Miles Rubin, give you 11 points, 2.5 blocks, 6.5 rebounds per game. Lone guy on the roster that gives you over 4.4 rebounds per game with Kamani Honusu, give you about 4.4 boards. Now, I will say Justin Moore has been able to give you more, 13 points, 4.5 assists, but he only shoots about 30.5% from 3, and now they go up against a Davidson team that is looking to play very slow and controlled, and I think that you are just going to get an absolute slog of a game. As for Davidson, in terms of total possessions per game, they are outside the top 300 in all of college basketball, 332nd, and for this Loyola Chicago team, they are somehow, someway even slower. For Loyola Chicago, right now they are checking in outside the top 345 in terms of total possessions per game, and with Davidson, have to love the overall versatility that you've got. It's a whole greater than some of its parts approach. You've got 5 different guys that give between 8.8 and 10.5 points per contest. You don't have a single guy on the roster, really, other than Ian plus 2, who gives you over 4 rebounds per game, but yet they do a solid job on the glass. They're not going to give themselves second chances. They're outside the top 200 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but they've been a top 150 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They're doing a good job in terms of being able to generate some turnovers as well. Top 200 team with that regard, top 125 team in terms of taking care of the ball themselves, and Davidson finds good looks from 3. They shoot 36.7% from 3-point range, with Robert Blums being your top scorer, 10.5 points, shoots 38.5% from 3-point range. Parker Frederickson comes over from Wake Forest. He's been able to shoot about 39.5% from 3-point range. Hunter Adam, he's right now shooting 48.9% from 3-point range. Certainly, I do think that that's going to be seeing a little bit of a fall off, but this is a Davidson team that's very content to be able to get good looks from 3-point range, and they face off against a Loyola Chicago team that's not been great in terms of being able to guard the 3-point line. They are currently 296th in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. They've been able to get a little bit of production out of the Charleston transfer into Luik Tavares, who's been able to give you double figures, shoots in the mid-30s from 3, but it's a Davidson team that in a road/shoot-score setting, they're allowing teams to only shoot about 31.5% from 3-point range. That's been a top 85 mark in all of college basketball, and I do think that that's going to be just enough to get the job done, and I do think that Davidson going to be nice and efficient with the offense, and I think that this is close enough for late game falling. So by total 137.5, I like the over, and with Davidson, I'm willing to lay up to 7 with them. 735, 736 on the card. It is California on the road against Virginia. Virginia is a 12.5 to 13.5 point favorite. Total on this game, 147.5, and with Virginia, I made them an 11.5 point favorite. So here at 12 plus, I'm going to be willing to take the points. This is a California team that's really been impressing me. Very mid-tempo team, 189th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Virginia outside the top 200, even with playing that triple overtime game against Virginia Tech. So they're a team that's relatively slow and controlled, and this has been a Virginia team that's been really efficient on the offensive side of things. Top 15 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and they do not allow you to get good looks from 3. They're a top 60 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Cal has been 82nd, though. They allow opponents to shoot from 3-point range at home about 30%. That goes up to 40% in a road/shoot-record setting. So I do think that normalizes a little bit, along with the fact that Cal is shooting 52% from 3-point range away from home. I don't think that it's going to continue to be 52%, but still, this is a top 40 team with their 3-point shooting percentage at 37.5%. Day-Day Ames, 17.5 points. He shoots 45% from 3. John Camden shoots 39.5% per 3, 13.5 points per contest. Chris Bell, along with Justin Pippen, they both give you 14.8 points per contest. And this has been a Cal team that has not generated for themselves a lot of second and third chances. They are well outside the top 175 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. That's a place where Virginia is going to have a big leg up, as for Virginia, they're rebounding 39.8% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That is number 8 in all of college basketball, but they're not too bad in terms of not allowing a lot of second and third chances themselves. And for the Cal team, they've been relatively okay in terms of generating turnovers. In a road/shoot-court setting, this is a unit that has been in the top 85 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. This Virginia team, they're not really going to push the issue a ton. Right now, they're about 200th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and Cal's a top 20 team in terms of taking care of the ball. For this Cal bunch, they've been a top 80 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and they're going to need that because for Cal, this is not the best rebounding team outside Lee Dort. You don't really have anyone that gives you 6+ rebounds per game. Meanwhile, for Virginia, top 10 team with regards to block shot percentage, with having Jonah Grunlow give you 8.5 points, 2.5 blocks, 7 rebounds per game. Thaddeus de Ritter, top scorer, 16.5 points, 6.5 boards, shoots 40% from 3. Jakari White shoots 50% from 3. And Virginia as a whole, they've been a top 45 team with their 3-point shooting percentage rated around about 36 to 37.5% from the outside. But in the end, I do think that you are going to be able to have this team remain lively. You've also had Jakari White for this Virginia team be a little bit banged up. He's missed last few games. He's probably going to be out of the fold once again. So I think that gives you all the more value on this Cal team. So I did set a total here of a 145.5. I do think that Cal does a nice job in a slower, more controlled game of holding in there. I'm willing to take 12 plus here with Cal, and I'm in on the under. 737, 738 on the card. Utah is on the road against Colorado. Colorado is a 9.5 point favorite. Total on this game, it is 162.5 to 163.5. Made a total of a 160. I do like the under. Now, this has been a Utah team that's not been great with regards to their defense. Right now, they're checking in well outside the top 125 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And it's a fast but not overly fast team, 109th in terms of total possessions per game. And Colorado's right in that same boat. They're about 127th in the country. And Colorado is making the most out of those possessions. They're 35th in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. And for Colorado, this has been one of the better 3-point shooting teams in all of college basketball. As for Colorado, right now they are shooting 37.5% from three-point range, goes up a hair above 38% at home. Meanwhile, you've got a Utah team that has been able to shoot about 35.8% from the outside. It's traveled okay. They're shooting about 34.5% from three. They aren't going to be too phased by the elevation factor because they do play out there in Salt Lake City, but still, I did make my line 10. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 9.5 with them because for Utah, you've really only got one guy that's pulling in boards for you. That'd be Keno Dawes, 12.5 points, 9.5 rebounds per game. You've only got one other player, James Okonkwo, who only gives you 2.7 points per contest, give you over 4 rebounds per game. This has been a bit of a sieve defensively. They're outside the top 220 in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Utah just not generating turnovers as well. They're outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Now Colorado is about 253rd in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but having Isaiah Johnson coming off the bench shoot 43.5% from 3 has been big. Barrington Argyris is right now shooting 58% from 3. That'll fall off a little bit, but 4.8 assists, 13.5 points per game. He's been great coming over from UC Riverside. Bengo Dunk has been able to give you about 11.5 points, 7 boards, block and a half per contest. He's been rock solid there. This is a Colorado team that is leaving something to be desired on defense. They're well outside the top 100 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they're also not allowing teams to be able to get a lot of second and third chances as well, and I do think that is going to be able to win out in this case, as you've got a Utah team that has been okay in terms of giving themselves some offensive rebounds. They're just not going to be able to be had here, as this Colorado team, in terms of percentage of opponents' missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, they've been a top 75 team with that regard, and they themselves at home, they grab about 35% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. I do think that you get a little bit more of a mid-tempo game. I do think that Colorado going to start to see a little bit of regression with regards to that 3-point shooting percentage offense, but with them only allowing teams to grab about 23.5% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound, that allows them to cover this number. So semi line at 10, willing to lay up to 9.5 with Colorado, and then on the under, semi total 160, 739, 740 on the card. It is Bradley playing us to Drake, and the Drake is a mid-tier underdog of 6.5 to 7 points. Total on this game anywhere between 144.5 to 145. Made a total here of a 136.5. I like the under. This has been a pile driven up total, even though you've got a Drake team that's looking to play relatively slow and controlled. 282nd in terms of total possessions per game. Now Bradley is speeding up their tempo a little bit, 247th in terms of total possessions per game. Both of these teams at their core, they're not really looking to run and gun, and for this Drake team, they've been able to do a really nice job in terms of being able to just keep things out in front of them and not allow open looks on the inside. This has been a Drake team that's been outside the top 200 with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, top 100 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and Drake is not going to generate any turnovers whatsoever. This Drake team, well outside the top 290 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Bradley, they're the exact opposite. This Bradley team is going to allow some open looks from the floor, but they are 17th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and last season, Bradley was a top 5 team in all of college basketball in terms of their 3-point shooting percentage. More of a country average team this year, but Jaquan Johnson, he has really been the main headliner in terms of the just steals that this team is able to generate. 17 points, 3.4 assists, 3.3 steals per contest, top 5 mark in all of college basketball. And he shoots 38% from 3. Bradley as a whole, they shoot 34.8% from the outside, while they themselves are outside the top 270 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Bradley is outside the top 175 with regards to rebound percentage, but they do have a true 7-footer, and you met Janovic, who's been able to give you about 5 boards, 6.5 points per game, and then AJ Smith throws in there about 8 points, 5 rebounds per game as well. So these guys have been able to do a solid job with that regard. And on the flip side of things, you have a Drake team that I think that Mr. Aku Frederico is going to do a solid job down low for them, 12.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game, and this Drake team just does a nice job in terms of taking care of the ball. You've got a Bradley team that generates a bunch of turnovers. Drake, top 20 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. And this Drake team does shoot about 36.5% from 3-point range, with Jalen Quinn leading the way, 17.5 points per contest. He only shoots about 32.5% from 3, but Jashawn Thomas, who comes over from Charlotte, 44.5% 3-point shooter, 12 points per contest. And then Brandon Applehans shoots 43.5% from 3, 7 points per contest. I do think that Drake finds a way to be able to hold in this game. This has been a Drake team that, with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage defense, when they've been away from home, they've been a top 50 team there with Bradley. They're right now that 6.5, 7-point favorite. I'm willing to take 7+ here with Drake in what I think is going to be a little bit more of a slog of game. I said my total 136.5, so in on the under and anything of 7+ here with Drake. 741, 742 on the card. It is South Dakota, and they are going to be on the road facing off against St. Thomas, and St. Thomas is a favorite of 13 to 13.5 points. 162 to 162.5 is the total line. For St. Thomas, I made them a 17-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. It's a South Dakota team that is once again looking to play at warp speed. South Dakota currently, in terms of total possessions per game, they are checking in the top 35 in all of college basketball. And you've got a St. Thomas team that's playing a little bit more slowly than they did a season ago. Still a relatively mid-tempo team, though, about 188th in the country. There's the total possessions per game, and St. Thomas is not going to give themselves any sort of second and third chances. 365th out of 365 teams teams in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but they make up for it with the way that they take care of the ball, and they face off against a South Dakota team that is middle of the road in terms of generating turnovers. So they're not great, they're not awful there, but this is a South Dakota team that once again has had a rough time with regards to their defense. They are currently 306th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and St. Thomas is a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. St. Thomas, neither here nor there with their defense, 158th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and after South Dakota was so good at taking care of the ball a season ago, they're down to about 260th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, and South Dakota just had the same three-point shooting team that they have been in the past, 268th in the country with regards to their three-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, for St. Thomas, they've seen a fall off down to about 201st with their three-point shooting percentage, but in the last 3 games, they are now shooting over 44% from three. I feel like they were the victims of some bad shooting regression to begin the season, and now they're starting to heat up, with Jankowski being one of the main guys, 15.5 points on 33% three-point shooting. Noah Sale, 21.5 points, 4.3 boards, 4.3 assists. He's only been able to shoot 29% from three-point. I think that is going to be going upward as the season goes along, and additionally for the St. Thomas team, they've been really good at being able to execute inside. Again, this is a top 15 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, a top 35 team with regards to their own two-point shooting percentage, and even though you've got the true 7-footer and Cameron Fens give you about 6 rebounds per game for the South Dakota team, they do leave themselves very vulnerable inside in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. This South Dakota team, 347th in all of college basketball. And if you look at them in a road/neutral venue, that's a bottom 10 mark in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, for the Tommies, they've been pretty solid with regards to being able to generate those turnovers, but that does leave them a little bit more vulnerable on the inside as well, outside the top 250 with regards to opponents' two-point shooting percentage. And for South Dakota, their main guy in the backcourt has been Isaac Bruns. He's been tremendous with 20.5 points per contest, shoots 35.5% from three, a little bit over a steal per contest, and then Jordan Crawford has been a do-it-all guy, 11.5 points, right around about 1.4 steals per game, but still, this is a unit that their three-point shooting percentage is not necessarily supreme. They're also outside the top 250 with regards to their own two-point shooting percentage as well. South Dakota, they are looking to play very, very fast, but they're just not holding up on defense, and with the way that St. Thomas has been able to be so efficient with their offense in terms of being able to hit those twos, I think that they pile drive the ball inside and get the job done that way. I did set the St. Thomas team as a 17-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, made by total a 167, so I'm also in on the over. 743, 744 on the card. Kansas State is on the road against Arizona. Arizona is a 20.5 to a 21-point favorite. 169.5 to 170.5 is the total line. I did set my line at a 20.5, so 21 becomes my buy point on Kansas State, and for Kansas State, they do need to clean up the turnovers. They've been outside the top 200 with regards to ball security, and this is a Kansas State team that they do allow a little bit too much inside as well. Kansas State right now about 132nd in the country in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, but if you look at things in a road/neutral court setting, this team has been well outside the top 225 with that regard, and for Arizona, this has been a team that's been really good on the inside. Toby Awaka is right now averaging a double-double off the bench. It's incredible. They're 8th in the country with regards to their two-point shooting percentage, but this is a Kansas State team that has been a top 40 team with their three-point shooting percentage, albeit they've been obviously doing a little bit of a better job when they've been at home rather than away from home, but I do think that they're going to be able to find a few open looks from three-point range against an Arizona team that has lots of open looks from three-point range, about 133rd in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage. That goes up to about 33.7% at home. That is outside the top 175. Now, Cole Pete has been great in terms of his overall versatility, 14.5 points, 5.5 boards, 3 assists per contest, and then Jaden Bradley is right now shooting 52% from three. That'll go downward, 13.5 points per contest, and then you've been able to have Monte Uves Crivas give you about 10.5 points, 8 rebounds per game. This Kansas State team is going to get absolutely dominated down low because you really don't have anyone on the roster that gives you over 6 rebounds per game, and their top rebounder, that would actually be a guard, as you've been able to have PJ Haggerty give you 23 points, about 5 rebounds per game, and then Nate Johnson also gives you about 5 boards, 3.5 assists per contest, but for Kansas State, they've been able to shoot about 38.5% from three-point range. I think that that's going to be just enough for them to be able to remain lively in this game, as they've been able to have the mixers and shakers do a nice job in terms of giving you some three-point shooting. As David Castillo, he's been able to contribute in a big way with 13.5 points. He shoots 37% from three. Abdi Bashir is right now shooting 47% from three-point range. No doubt about it. I think that that's going to be doing for a little bit of regression, but with this Kansas State team, even though they don't have a lot down low, I do think that the overall three-point shooting and Arizona giving it up a little bit around the perimeter, and Arizona being a good but not great team in terms of generating turnovers. That's just enough for Kansas State to hold in there. I do think that Kansas State regresses a little bit from shooting 40.7% from three-point range away from home, but still, I'm going to be willing to take 21 plus here with Kansas State, and did set a total of 168.5. You do have a Kansas State team that's in the top 50 in terms of total possessions per game. Arizona, a little bit slower than in past years at about 82nd, but that Arizona defense, top 20 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, so like the under, and anything of 21 plus here with Kansas State. 745, 746 on the card. Alabama is going to be on the road against Vanderbilt. Here's a high total for you. You've got a total of 177.5 to 178.5, and Vanderbilt is a 4 to 4.5 point favorite, and I'm willing to take the points with Alabama. I did set them as an underdog of 3.5 points. Now, for Vanderbilt, this is going to be the supreme team with regards to their low post play, as you've got Jalen Washington give you 5 plus rebounds per game, Devin McLaughlin 7 plus boards per contest, but for this Alabama team, even though they have been very unsightly with regards to their rebounding, this team is well outside the top 225 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They're getting better and better as the season goes along. They didn't Terrell now give you 8.5 points, 6 rebounds per game, and they were without Kenton Bristow to begin the season. He only gives you 4.5 points per game, but comes in from Tarleton State, so he's able to generate turnovers, 5 rebounds, nearly a block per contest, and then LeBaron Filan. This guy's been able to give you 21.5 points per game, shoots 38.5% for 3, and for this Alabama team, they are absolutely trying to unload from 3-point range. This team just takes 3 after 3 after 3, and while this has been a Vanderbilt team that has been one of the better defensive teams in all of college basketball, this Vanderbilt team is actually 27th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Frankie Collins, who was giving you 2 plus steals per game, and I would say was one of the more underrated defenders in all of college basketball, is currently out of the fold, as Vanderbilt right now 10th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. I do think that that's going to be going northward without having Collins out there. And Alabama, they're allowing teams to shoot 31.5% from 3. That's a top 90 mark in the country. That does go up a hair above 33% away from home, but for Aiden Holloway, he's able to give you 18.5 points, right around about 4 boards per contest. Now, one thing that Vanderbilt is not going to be is under duress, as this Alabama team outside the top 330 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but Alabama also a top 25 team in terms of taking care of the ball as well, and Vanderbilt, they have been a top 125 team in terms of generating turnovers themselves. They still do have out there Duke Miles along Tyler Tanner. They combine for 5.3 steals per contest, 33.3 points per game, and Tanner, he's able to shoot 43% from 3. Vanderbilt as a whole, they shoot 37.9% for 3-point. That's a top 35 mark in all of college basketball, but they're even better with regards to their interior offense, as they've been actually a top 15 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage as well. And for this Vanderbilt team, when they are at home, that's really when they're able to just hit their peak with regards to going inside, because they actually shoot better from 3-point range away from home rather than at home at 39.5% from 3-point range away from home. But I do think that in the end, Alabama is going to be able to find a way to hold in there. I think that Collins injury is going to be pretty big, and I certainly think that you get an up and down game, but I do think that Alabama, with getting back Bristow, is going to be a little bit stronger down low. Set a total of a 177.5. So at a 178 plus in on the under, and I'm willing to take 4 plus here with Alabama. 747, 748 on the card. It is Clemson, and they're going to be playing us SMU. SMU an underdog of 4 to 4.5 points, and total is 148.5 to 150.5, and set a total of 146.5. I do like the under. This is going to be a massive tempo war, as you've got a Clemson team that is about 291st in terms of total possessions per game. SMU is 22nd, and for Clemson, you've got really good balance. Top 55 team in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. This Clemson bunch has been also very good in terms of taking care of the ball. Top 30 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, despite not having that main facilitator. Right now, Dylan Hunter with his 2.7 assists per game, he leads away, but it's just really a big-time collective here for Clemson. You've got 9 different guys who give you between 5.5 and 11.7 points per contest. RJ Godfrey is that top scorer. He's been able to give you 11.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. And then Carter Welling, 5.8 boards, 10 points per game. It's a Clemson team that, you shoot about 3.5% from 3 points, but that 3-point shooting defense has been amazing. There are a lot of teams that shoot 28% from 3-point range. That is a top 12 mark in all of college basketball. And this is an SMU team that does leave themselves a little bit vulnerable down low. This, despite the fact that you've been able to get good production out of Samat Yidiglu down low, 8.5 boards, 11 points per game. And then Kevin Miller, talk about a great facilitator. 7.5 assists, 20.5 points per contest, shoots 44% from 3, but this is an SMU team that they themselves have been very vulnerable on the inside. They are outside the top 175 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. To SMU's credit, they do pretty much everything on offense well. They're a top 40 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but I do think that Clemson is going to do a nice job not allowing this SMU team to be able to grab second and third chances, and I do think that they're going to be able to dominate the boards despite the fact that you don't necessarily have that one supreme guy that has been able to give you a whole bunch of rebounds. And this is an SMU team that is about 72nd in the country in terms of offensive rebound percentage, and a road side should score setting. That is a top 50 mark, actually, but with Clemson doing a nice job in terms of just not allowing themselves to get careless with it, with them being able to take care of the ball, and Clemson being 31st in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. I think that wins out and allows them to be able to control the tenor of this game. I did set my line at a 4.5, so hold away up to 4 with Clemson, and on the under, I did set that total at a 146.5. 749, 750 on the card. It is Arkansas. They're going to be on the road against Ole Miss. Ole Miss is a home underdog of 4.5 to 5 points. 151.5 to 153.5 is the total, and I'm going to be in on that over. I set my total at a 154. You've got an Ole Miss team that's going to be looking to play very slowly, and an Arkansas team that is very much gunning it right now. Arkansas, in terms of total possessions per game, they are 76th in all of college basketball. They actually slow down quite a bit when they are away from home, so interesting little bit of a tidbit there. Meanwhile, you've got a Mississippi team that they are currently checking in about 264th in terms of total possessions per game, and for Mississippi, they have been able to do a nice job taking care of the ball. They're turning the ball over less than 11 times per contest. They're going to be going up against an Arkansas team that's been very good with their three-point shooting defense. Now, the interior defense for Arkansas, that's leaving something to be desired. They're outside the top 175 towards opponents' two-point shooting percentage, but they allow opponents to shoot less than 31% from three, while they themselves shoot over 39% from the outside. That's a top 20 mark in the country, with having the freshmen in Malik Thomas and Darius Acuff lead the way. Acuff, 44% three-point shooter, 6 assists, 19.5 points per game. Thomas, 15 points per contest, but for Arkansas, even though they do a great job taking care of the ball, top 20 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, outside the top 200 in terms of generating those turnovers as well. And this is an Arkansas team that has been well outside the top 125 in terms of percentage of opponents' missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Now, Ole Miss not doing a great job on the glass. They're outside the top 100 with regards to rebound percentage, but you do have Malik Dia giving you 14.5 points, 7 rebounds per game. One guy that gives you over 5 rebounds per game, but I do think that Corey Chest, James Scott, who both give you 4.8 rebounds per game apiece, they only combine for 8 points per game. They're going to be able to step up. AJ Storr has actually shot 38% from 3, 11.5 points, doesn't really turn the ball over a ton, but it just feels like he's been a little bit of an addition by subtraction out there, as the interior offense for Ole Miss just has not been there. This is a bunch as well outside the top 200 with regards to their two-point shooting percentage, but they're also a top 100 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. For this Ole Miss team, they've also been outside the top 225 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, so that's a little bit of a worry, and that's a big reason why I'm going to be in on this total over, but I do think that Mississippi is going to be able to find a little bit more defense here. They have been about 58th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they're also allowing about 16.5 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than away from home. And this has been an Arkansas team that has actually traveled quite well with their offense. But again, with Arkansas necessarily being the most supreme team down low, even though you do have a guy in Trayvon Brazil who's able to pop it from 3, give you 6+ rebounds, 15+ points per game, I do think that Ole Miss is going to be able to hold in there. Semi-line at 4, so at the 4.5 plus, we'll take the points with Ole Miss, and I do like the over as well. And then this is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games. This is 751, 752. Boise State, they play the Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon is a underdog of 8.5 points. Totals between 136.5 to 137.5, and I'd like the under. I set my total at a 136. You've got two teams that are not necessarily looking to push a lot of tempo. Now, Boise State is actually, in terms of total possessions per game, now inside the top 230 in all of college basketball. That said, you take a look at this Boise State team, and prior to that triple overtime game that we saw a few days ago, they were outside the top 220 in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, Grand Canyon were around about 255th in terms of total possessions per game. Not a lot of second chances to be ahead here either. This is a Boise State team that allows opponents to grab 20.9% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound, top 5 mark in all of college basketball. But Grand Canyon is a top 50 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage as well, and Grand Canyon just got off to a really rough start with their offense to begin the season. This is not going to be some sort of team that goes into flamethrower mode from 3-point range or anything like that, but you've got Jaden Henley, now give you 17.5 points per contest. He shoots 25% from 3. Grand Canyon as a whole outside the top 310 with their 30.3% 3-point shooting percentage, but they do a nice job in terms of being able to give themselves those second and third chances. They do a nice job in terms of generating turnovers. They've been a top 130 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and they're just doing a great job overall executing on defense, with Donna Wusu-Anane being a stat sheet sufferer, 2.5 assists, 9 rebounds, 7 points per contest. Makai Williams, 12.5 points, shoots 32.5% from 3. Caleb Shaw has been that top 3-point shooter at about 42.5% from the outside, but you've also got a Boise State team that hasn't necessarily been the most efficient offense in the world themselves. Boise State outside the top 160 in terms of points per possession, and Grand Canyon overall is 140th, but that falls outside the top 200 away from home. But Boise State, it just feels like with Dylan Andrews, he hasn't been been a great fit. Was a double-figure scorer over at UCLA 2 years ago. 10.5 points, 4 assists, at 2.6 turnovers per game. Shoots less than 30% from three. Andrew Meadows has been great. 12.5 points, 4 boards. He shoots 40% from three. And this team as a collective just, again, they do such a great job on the glass. Nobody that gives you over 5.4 rebounds per game, with Drew Fielder being that main rebounder. But you got a quartet of guys with at least 4.7 rebounds per game. You've been able to get some good production out of someone like Pearson Carmichael when you've needed him as well. And for Boise State, they're going to be able to hold up defensively, but they have been outside the top 160 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, with Grand Canyon really struggling with regards to their 3-point shot and them looking to be able to drive the ball a little bit more inside. I think that keeps Grand Canyon in this game. So set at 12-136. I'm in on the under end. So Boise State is a 6-point favorite, so taking the 8.5 with Grand Canyon, and now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-501, 306-502. It is Loyola of Maryland, and they're going to be on the road against Army. Army is a favorite of 4.5 points. 148.5 to 150.5 is the total, and I set this total at a 143.5. I do like the under. This is an Army team that just has not been great in terms of generating offense at home, and for Army, they are very much looking to go bombs away from three-point range. They attempt 56.7% of their field goal attempts at home from three-point range, second highest mark in all of college basketball, and yet they are currently 319th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. As for Army, they're looking to have a little bit of Curry in their life. As Ryan Curry, he's been Mr. Do-It-All for the team. 14.5 points, 5.5 boards, 5 assists. He does shoot 37.5% from three. And then Jackson Bell and Jackson Furman, the two Jacksons, have been able to shoot 40+% from three. They both give you between 10.5 to 11 points per contest, but still, team as a whole, they shoot about 33.7% from three-point range. This squad has been unable to get to the free throw line outside the top 290 in terms of free throw attempts on a per possession basis. On defense, they're outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and this Loyola team certainly has not been some sort of a great offense. They're about 261st in the country in terms of points per possession, but away from home, they've been a top 100 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. Army outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and this Loyola Maryland team, I think, is going to be able to do a nice job down low, as they have been a top 190 team in terms of their rebound percentage. Jacob Theodusu has been really able to give you a little bit of everything. 15.5 points, 4.5 boards, 3.5 assists. Doesn't necessarily pop it well from three, but that's why you got Jordan Steinke shooting 37% from three with 10.5 points per contest. Sam Springer, 43.5% 3-point shooter, 6.5 points per game. Jonas Tudis has been able to give you about 4 rebounds per game, so these guys have been rock solid there. Now Loyola Maryland, they do shoot 66% at the free throw line. That is less than tremendous, and you've got an Army team on the flip side that they're shooting right around 70.5% at the free throw line. Do you think that this is going to be a rather controlled game? Loyola Maryland is not a team that's really looking to push a ton of tempo, not necessarily the slowest team in the world, but in terms of total possessions, bringing them about 205th. You got an Army team that, meanwhile, they've been looking to push a little bit more tempo in terms of total possessions per game. They're more around about 176, but do you think that Army's not really going to be able to bury those threes? So we'll take the points with Loyola Maryland, made them a 1.5 point underdog again, and on the under, semi-total 143.5, 306-503, 306-504. It is Holy Cross. They are going to be on the road against Lehigh, and Lehigh finds themselves as a 2.5 to a 3.5 point favorite. 136.5 to 137.5 is the total. I did set a total here of a 142. I like the over. With Holy Cross, they are a very slow and controlled team. 352nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Lehigh is not necessarily getting rambunctious with it, but you know what? 181st in terms of total possessions per game, goes into the top 150 when they are at home. And for Lehigh, this has been a team that has just gotten absolutely blasted on the glass. They're outside the top 340 in terms of their overall rebound percentage, but it's not like this Holy Cross team has been some sort of amazing rebounding team as well. And with Holy Cross, they're only about 300th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They don't necessarily take the biggest fall off when they're away from home, but I do think that Holy Cross is actually doing for a lot of positivity with that offense, because last year they were a top 20 team with their 3-point shooting percentage, brought back darn near everyone, and right now they're shooting 30.3% from three. That is 301st in all of college basketball. You've been able to have some good versatility with this Holy Cross team, as well as you've got someone that's in 6'6", who's been able to supply 11 points, 4 boards per contest, and Joe Nugent. He's been able to shoot 37.5% from three. Gabe Warren is a 34% 3-point shooter with 10.5 points per contest, and then Tyler Boston last year shot literally 81% from three, 13.5 points, 4 boards, down to about 36% from three. Those are the pretty much the lone three guys on the roster that shoot above 30% from three-point range. So been a little bit of a fall off there. Holy Cross team that is outside the top 250 with regards to their overall rebound percentage, but they're really not allowing a lot of second and third chances as well, which I think is a little bit encouraging. But for Holy Cross, even though they're not allowing a lot of second and third chances, this team has been very vulnerable on the inside, and that's where I do think that this Lehigh team is really going to be able to feast. Right now for Holy Cross, they are 353rd in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. At Lehigh, a much more respectable 160th. That does fall outside the top 225 in their home games, but For Lehigh, they're also going to have the top scorer in this game, as Nasir Woodlock is right now supplying 2.5 assists, 4 boards, 19 points per game, shoots 35% from 3. Lehigh as a whole, they're only shooting about 32% from 3, and they're very much encouraging teams to go inside. They're a top 20 team in terms of percentage of opponent shots that come from 2-point range. That's part of the reason why they've been getting so badly blasted on the glass. And for this Holy Cross team, they need to try to find a way to be able to generate some turnovers against a Lehigh team that's been very careless with it. They're outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, but also Lehigh team that's been respectable in terms of generating turnovers themselves. Top 100 team in terms of turnovers for us on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, Holy Cross are about 254th with this regard, and I do think that Lehigh is going to be able to do a solid job in this case. But again, I do think that Holy Cross is going to be able to get their 3-point shooting going, and I do think that a Lehigh team that has been just getting absolutely decimated on the glass, they're going to continue to do so as well in a game that's going to be close enough for late game filling and is going to see some offensive efficiency. I set my total at a 142. I'm going to be in on the over. And with Lehigh, I set them as just a 2-point favorite, so here at 2.5 to 3.5, I'm going to take those points with Holy Cross. 3-6-5-05, 3-6-5-06. Charleston Southern is on the road against Winthrop. Winthrop is a 6.5 to a 7.5 point favorite. 165.5 is the total, and I said Winthrop as a 7.5 point favorite, so going to be willing to lay the 6.5 with them. With Winthrop, they're just doing an absolutely tremendous job in terms of being able to take care of the ball, and they've been a little bit, shall we say, down with regards to generating turnovers, but still a top 200 team in terms of turnovers for us on a per possession basis, and Winthrop is not going to be under duress whatsoever. Charleston Southern, 363rd in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers for us on a per possession basis, but there's a clear reason why this Charleston Southern team is not generating turnovers. They've been one of the best teams in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Charleston Southern is right now allowing teams to shoot 31% from 3-point range in a road/court setting. That is a top 75 mark in all of college basketball. Not really allowing a lot easy down low either, being 26th in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. That said, I still do like Winthrop to be able to find a way to get the job done because they're going to have a lot of, shall we say, clean possessions. Now, Winthrop has been outside the top 250 with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage defense, but bringing in the Duquesne transfer and Kareem Rozier has been very good for this offense. How about 12.5 points, 4 assists per contest? He shoots 37% from 3. Cody Cluid is able to shoot 39.5% from 3. Winthrop as a whole, they shoot 34.5% from 3. They've been a top 150 team in terms of both their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, or a top 75 team in terms of taking care of the ball. And Winthrop is a team that's looking to play up tempo. They're about 96th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Charleston Southern is an even more up tempo team. Charleston Southern right now has been 45th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. They do get slowed down a little bit more away from home, and this is a Winthrop team that they themselves are going to be allowing a few chances down low. Their opponent's 2-point shooting percentage being outside the top 175, but for this Winthrop team, they've also been one of the best rebounding teams in all of college basketball. So Charleston Southern, who's been able to do a nice job inside, they're a top 175 team in terms of rebound percentage. They're not going to be able to hold up as much against a Winthrop team that has been in their home games allowing teams to grab only 17.7% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. And then if you take a look at them on the offensive glass, this Winthrop team is 76th in terms of percentage of the missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. If you look at the home games, and the home games, only 40.5% of their misses become an offensive rebound. That is a top 30 mark in all of college basketball. And for Charleston Southern, they've actually been looking off the bench for a lot of their production, as you've had Alan Sumler been coming off the bench recently. He's been really good with about 15 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. Then Bryson Blaine, he typically is a sixth man that gives you 17.5 points, 7.5 boards, 3.5 assists, shoots 37.5% from 3. Charleston Southern as a whole shoots 36% from 3, top 100 mark in all of college basketball, top 125 team in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage. So I think that you get points up on the board, but I do think that with Charleston Southern being outside the top 240 in terms of taking care of the ball, that is going to be a little bit of an issue for them, and that allows Winthrop to be able to get the job done. Did set a total here of a 163.5. I think that Winthrop gets a few fewer second chances than they typically do against the Charleston Southern team, especially with Charleston Southern now getting both the Bradfords back in the fold. They were dealing with a little bit of an injury to begin the season to one of their main guys down low, and Devin Bradford, who's only giving you about like 2.5 to 3 rebounds per game, but he's been able to get back in there. And then his brother Nate Bradford, about 4 boards, just under a block per contest, and then Reese Jones, 2 blocks per game. So in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 7 with Winthrop. 306, 507, 306, 508. Longwood is on the road against UNC Asheville. UNC Asheville is a favorite here of 4.5 points. 148.5 is the total, and I set my total 147.5. I like the under. UNC Asheville has actually slowed themselves down quite a bit from past years. Asheville right now in terms of total possessions per game, 234th in the country. Longwood is looking to play with a little bit more pace at 152nd, but this team does slow down a little bit more away from home. And for this Longwood team, they've been good in terms of grabbing second and third chances. Top 80 team in terms of their offensive rebound percentage. And for Longwood, this has been actually a very, very good team in terms of generating turnovers against an Asheville team that's been outside the top 285 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. Longwood 95th in terms of generating those turnovers. Here's the issue that you got for this Longwood team. No no three-point shooting whatsoever. 346th in the country with regards to that outside shooting. And for UNC Asheville, they've been able to have Justin Wright be Mr. Wright with about 15 plus points per contest, shooting well over 40% from three-point. And Asheville is right now 91st in the country with regards to their own three-point shooting percentage at about 35.7%. I do think that that's going to win out in this case. You've got for Longwood a guy in Jacoy Hutchinson, who I really like coming on over from George Washington. He's been able to lead the way with 12.5 points, 3 assists per contest. But for Longwood, even though they generate as many turnovers as they do, they're outside the top 300 in terms of their ball security, 14.5 turnovers per game. They've been solid with their interior offense, top 150 team in terms of opponents or their own 2-point shooting percentage, and in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, they've been more around about 300th. You've got Jonah Nazemi along with Elijah Tucker, both give you about 11.5 points per contest. They've been able to combine for about 12 rebounds per game for this Longwood team. They've been a top 150 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, so they've been able to do a relatively solid job in terms of holding up with that regard. But you've got a UNC Asheville team that has Toya Solomon down low, give you about 6.5 boards, 17.5 points per game. Cameron Taylor has also been really good in terms of being a matrix, filling up every column of the stat sheet. 16 points, 6 boards, 3 assists, only shoots about 16% from 3-point, but the rest of the guys, they pick them up as you've had DJ Turner Patrick shoot 39% from 3. He's supplying about 10 points, 4 rebounds per game, and for this Asheville team, they have been a top 225 team with regards to their own rebound percentage, and I do think that for Asheville, being a team that's been okay at being able to guard the arc, they are outside the top 200 themselves in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. I do think that they find a way to persevere. I think that both of these teams just too sloppy with the ball to be able to get you an over. With both of these teams turning it over as much as they do, I'm in on the under. I set my total 147.5, but I like Asheville's outside shooting to be able to persevere. I did set them as a 5-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay up to 5 with them. 306, 509, 306, 510. Boston U is on the road against Lafayette. Lafayette is a home underdog of a point total on this game. It is 147, and with Lafayette, I made them the 1.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to take a shot on Lafayette on the money line. It's a Boston U team that's playing at one of the slowest paces that you're going to find in the country, 356 in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, for Lafayette, they're about 257th in the country. Boston U has just become unsightly bad with their defense. They really prove home my point of just because you play slowly doesn't mean that you play good defense. 330th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Strangely, they allow 4.1 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. And Lafayette, they're 9th in the country with this regard as well. But even with that, I'm in on the under because you do have a pair of teams that have been very suspect with regards to being able to execute on offense as well. Boston U has actually been a really good 3-point shooting team. I think they're doing for quite a bit of regression. Right now, they are 43rd in the country, shooting about 37.1% from the outside, and they've been able to get Mr. Michael Air McNair to be able to shoot well over 40% from 3-point. He's been the main guy, being able to give you 15 points per contest on that 45% 3-point shooting chance. Gladen has been able to give you 12.5 points. Doesn't necessarily shoot it well from 3, but same use along with Andrew Bassina. These guys have been able to combine for 17 points. They both shoot over 40% from 3, but Boston U also very careless with the ball. Outside the top 200 in terms of ball security. They're outside the top 300 in terms of generating turnovers themselves. And for Lafayette, I do think that they're going to do a nice job of taking it to a bunch that's outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, with Lafayette having 2 main headline scores. Andrew Phillips, 15 points, shoots 36% for 3. Caleb Williams, 41% 3-point shooter, 17.5 points, 3.5 boards, 3 assists per game for Lafayette. They are a top 100 team with their 3-point shooting percentage at 36%. Now, they themselves are allowing teams to shoot 34.5% from the outside, and they also have been outside the top 250 in terms of generating turnovers, but I don't think that either of these teams are really going to be giving themselves a lot of second and third chances. Lafayette, with Justin Vanderbond from last year being out, they're now well outside the top 275 in terms of their offensive rebound percentage. You've got a Boston U team that typically they've been really good on the glass. Right now, they're only grabbing 24% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound in a road/neutral court setting. That is well outside the top 270 in all of college basketball. With this being a low possession game, I do think they can get an under where Lafayette perseveres, especially with Boston U being a very suspect free throw shooting team as well. This is a Boston U team that in a nip and tuck spot, they're outside the top 300 shooting 67.6% at the free throw line. So maybe my line 1.5 with Lafayette being the favorite. Like Lafayette on the money line, and I like this under 365-11, 365-12. American is going to be on the road against Colgate, and American is an American-sized underdog as they're between a 5 to a 5.5 point underdog, and total on this game, you're getting it at a 150, and I do like this under. I set my total at a 147.5 for American. They were playing really fast to begin the season. They typically are outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game. They're down to about 244th. If you look since December 1st, they have been a bottom 50 team in terms of total possessions per game, so they're getting back to their roots. Meanwhile, you've got a Colgate team that is out pushing tempo themselves. They're about 239th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and you're not going to be getting a lot of second chance opportunities in this game. This is a Colgate team as one of the worst offensive rebound rate teams teams in all of college basketball at 335th. Meanwhile, for this American team, 342nd. So there's that aspect of things. And American has been a top 85 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but this is a Colgate team that they do a nice job in terms of taking care of the ball. Only 10.3 turnovers per game, top 65 team. There's a fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and I think that Jalen Cox goes into takeover mode. 16.5 points, 5.5 assists, 2 steals. He shoots 46% from 3. Colgate as a whole, they're not necessarily one of those supreme 3-point shooting teams, but back in the top 150, they shoot 35.5% from 3. And this is a Colgate team that, while they're not going to force the issue whatsoever in terms of generating turnovers, they are outside the top 290 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They're not a bad team in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. They do rank in the top 225 in both categories. And for this Colgate team, when they have been at home, they've been allowing teams to shoot 39.5% from 3 compared to 30.8% away from home. I do think that we are going to start to see that ironing out moving forward. And this is an American team that they leave themselves very vulnerable from the outside. They're allowing teams to shoot 37% from 3. That's outside the top 300 in all of college basketball. Now, for American, you do have to like the fact that Matt Mayock has been able to give you some good versatility. Saints in that neighborhood, about 6'6" or so, and he's been able to supply 8.5 points from 3-point range. He's currently shooting 38.5 to 39.5% from 3-point range, and then you got Maiden Collins along with Greg Jones, your top 2 scorers combined for 25 points per game, but both these guys shoot less than 27% from 3-point range. It's an American team that, while they do a nice job in terms of generating turnovers, are outside the top 130 with regards to their own ball security. For American, they're a country average team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage, with Wyatt Desus being able to give you 9.5 points. He shoots 40% from 3, and Julian Eteribe, 9.5 points, 5.5 boards, 2 assists. He's been able to do a bit of everything, but I do think that in the end, Colgate is going to do a nice job in terms of taking care of the ball. I think that this is going to be a slow down game that Colgate finds a way to be able perseverance. Set my line at 7.5, so I want to lay up to 7 here with Colgate, and I like the under 36.5-13, 36.5-14. Presbyterian is going to be on the road against Radford, and Radford finds themselves as the favorite at home. You're going to be laying with them between 5 to 5.5 points. 148 is the total. I just said Radford as a 6-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay the 5 to 5.5. Now you've got a big time tempo war here with Radford. They are 19th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Presbyterian 358th, and for Presbyterian, they certainly have been giving it up from the outside. They're allowing teams to shoot about 34% from 3-point range outside the top 200 with that regard, but that's actually better than Radford, who's 288th in the country with that regard. And at home, Radford is actually allowing teams to shoot over 38% from 3-point range, but I think that that's due for some positivity against the Presbyterian team that is right now shooting 27.3% from 3-point range away from home. That's outside the top 340 nationally. The really forte of this Presbyterian team is down low, as they've got Jonah Pierce along Jalen Peterson, great name, being able to combine for about 16.5 rebounds per game. Pierce is your main scorer with 15.5 points, a little bit over block per contest. Peterson, block per contest, but neither of these guys really popping from 3. Carl Parrish, 40% 3-point shooter, 13 points per game. He's been great, but outside of Josh Pickett, who shoots 37.5% from 3-point range, 5 points per contest, you really have nobody else on the roster that shoots above 30% from 3-point range. This has been a Presbyterian team that has been able to do an okay job on the inside, top 175 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but also with Presbyterian, they're having a really tough time taking care of the ball. They're right around about 300th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and this is not a team that's really going to be forcing the issue themselves, and that's big because this Radford team has been outside the top 250 with regards to their own ball security, with Presbyterian outside the top 250 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. And for this Radford team, it is a little bit of a top-heavy team. They bring in 2 guards from the ACC that have really been able to elevate the roster, as you had like 50-plus points in a game against Coppin State from Dennis Parker, who comes over from NC State. Sachi suffered 19.5 points, 5.5 boards. Right now, he's shooting 44% from 3-point range, so he's been supreme there. And then Del Jones comes over from Clemson, 14.5 points, 3.5 assists, 3 rebounds per game. For a Radford team that as a whole, they shoot 34% from 3, so they've been able to do it either here nor there job there, and then they've been able to get a little bit more down low out of Tyson Brown, 7 points, 7 rebounds per game. Jalen Johnson, so I'll give you 2.3 steals per game. And Radford, all of a sudden, is starting to generate a few more turnovers. They have become a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They sort of gamble for those turnovers in the way that they don't guard the 3-point line, but again, with the way that Presbyterian just does not shoot it well from 3-point range, I do think that Radford is going to be able to generate those turnovers. I think that they hold up down low, being a top 200 team with regards to offensive rebound percentage, and having Lucas Wells be able to give you 7 points, and he from 3-point range has shot 49% from 3-point range. Probably see a little bit of fall off there, but do think that Radford finds a way to get the job done, and I do think that you get enough here for late game fouling, but I just don't think you get enough possessions here for and over. I think that Radford gets slowed down a little bit, so my total at 144, so like the under, and I'm willing to lay up to 5.5 here with Radford. 306, 515, 306, 516. You've got Bucknell on the road against Navy. Navy's a 7.5 point favorite. 135 is the total. Set a total of 136.5. I do like the over. Now, for both of these teams, they're not really pushing a lot of tempo. Navy 325th in terms of total possessions per game. Bucknell a little bit faster than that at 282nd, but this is a Bucknell team that's just wretched with regards to their defense. Now, Bucknell's actually not too bad in terms of generating turnovers. They have become a team that's been in the top 175 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but once again, one of those teams that gambles for turnovers, as they're right now 350th in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and this has been a Navy team that's been a top 130 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, not allowing good looks from three, 99th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and this is not a Bucknell team that's really going to light you up from distance. They're shooting 31.2% for three outside the top 300 in all of college basketball. Amon Doris along with Roy Bajarki, these two guys are both giving you 11.9 points per contest, and Bijel, hopefully I said that correct, I have no idea how to say his name, he did return to the lineup, had a double-double in that game against Lehigh after he missed 5 games, so he should be all good to go in this one, but and right now, in terms of their rebounding, they're relying upon Gugar Bisic, who comes over from Toledo, give you about 5 points, 5.7 rebounds per game. Other than Bajaik, he's the only guy that gives you over 4.5 rebounds per game. This Bucknell team is just getting lambasted on the glass. They're well outside the top 250 with that regard. I will say they're not allowing a ton of second and third chances, but they're outside the top 300 in terms of giving themselves a second and third chance, and I do think that they're going to be eaten up down low by a guy in Aiden Koe, who's been able to give you 13 plus points. He's been able to supply 9 plus rebounds per game. Don Draper is able to give you 6 plus rebounds per game. It's an Navy team that's neither here nor there with regards to being able to grab second and third chances themselves, but they don't really allow you to be able to get those second and third chances as well. This Navy team, top 100 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and then you've been able to have Austin Benjini just go absolutely hog wild from 3-point range. He's averaging 17 plus points per contest, shooting well above 45% from 3-point range, and then Jinwoo Kim, he's seen a little bit of a, shall we say, downtick with his 3-point shooting percentage from a season ago down to about 33%, but he's been able to supply about 10 points per game. It's a Navy team that has been outside the top 200 with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage, but the way that they should be able to own the glass here, and Navy being about a country average team in terms of generating turnovers, they should be able to win out there against a Bucknell team that's been wretched with their defense. Semi-total 136.5, like the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 8 with Navy, and wrap things up with 306, 517, 306, 518. Gardner-Webb, they're going to be on the road. They're facing off against High Point, and High Point looking to not be a low point as they are a mondo favorite in this game with 27 points. 164 is the total. Semi-total 163.5. I'm in on the under mainly because I just don't know if Gardner-Webb does enough to do their part with regards to this one. And Gardner-Webb is awful in pretty much every facet of basketball. They're outside the top 300 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. They're allowing opponents to grab 35.9% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. And this is a High Point team that, my goodness, they have been so efficient with regards to their offense. This High Point team is right now number 15 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They really don't turn the ball over all, and they're up with their tempo. They're up to about 165th in terms of total possessions per game. This Gardner-Webb team is actually pushing a little bit of tempo. They're about 99th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but for Gardner-Webb, right now they are looking for anything out there in the backcourt whatsoever because they are turning the ball over 13.5 times per contest outside the top 275 in terms of ball security. Spencer Sims has actually shot 50% for 3 with 11.5 points per game, but you don't have anyone on the roster that gives you over 2.1 assists per contest. You've got Jacob Hovreth along with Jacob Hudson combined for about 21 points per contest, and with Hogarth, he does give you 7.4 rebounds per game. These are the only two guys in the two Jacobs that give you over 3.4 rebounds per game, and High Point is just going to eat them for lunch down low. As for High Point, you've got the versatility of Cameron Fletcher, began his career over at Florida State along with Xavier, 16.5 points. He shoots 37.5% from 3-point range, and for this High Point team, each of your top 7 scorers shoot at least 36.5% from 3-point range. You're getting good production on Scary Terry Anderson, 13.5 points, 5.5 boards, shoots 46% from 3-point range. And it's a High Point team that is a top 15 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, one of the best turnover teams, both on offense and on defense in all of college basketball. Sometimes they leave themselves a little bit vulnerable from 3-point range, outside the top 145 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but you've got a Gardner-Webb team that really, outside of Sims, they don't knock down their threes. They are well outside the top 275 with that regard. I think you get clear domination here from High Point against a Gardner-Webb team that is just generating nothing on offense or on defense. Set a total of 163.5, so here at 164 in on the under. At the High Point, I'm willing to lay up to 31 points with them, and that'll wrap things up for the Wednesday edition of Coast to Coast Soups, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Big thanks to Rob Donaldson of the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets. He joined me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Soups, you're able to subscribe wherever you get podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letter CM, naming does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Coming at you guys every single day on this podcast with picks and analysis on every game, every day. So I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.